Good morning. I'm Eric Blank, and this is the Commissioners' Weekly Meeting for Wednesday, May 15th, 2024. Commissioner Planner, are you ready to approve the consent agenda?
Yes, I would vote to approve the consent agenda. Good morning.
Morning. Commissioner Gilman,
Good morning. I would also vote to approve the consent agenda.
as would I. Proceeding number 24AL-0176TR, Mr. Gramlich, Mountain Jeep LLC.
Yes, good morning. I'm Gary Gramlich of the transportation staff. This is a filing as stated by Mountain Jeep that was submitted to the commission on April 15th to be effective on May 16th. The Mountain Jeep's had authority since February of 21 to provide service and sightseeing service in the Colorado Springs area, including El Paso Park and Teller counties. It provides 5 sightseeing tours. The tours are to the Gardens of the Gods, one to Cripple Creek, one to Breckenridge, and the one that's on the proceeding today is a Pikes Peak tour from the base up the highway to the summit. This service is really managed by the city of Colorado Springs. It's on U.S. Forest Service land, but is managed by the city, and the city has decided to add a fee charged each of the carriers that provides this service a fee. In the advice letter submitted by the owner, he stated it was a 5% fee. I did contact the city of Colorado Springs, and they says initially it was, but it was later lowered to 3% to match the amount charged by the U.S. Forest Service. Mountain Jeep is a relatively small carrier, only transported 1,500 passengers in 2022 and 3,100 passengers in 23. The carriers that transport passengers on to the summit also have to pay the entry fee, but now they will also have to pay this 3% of it adjusted revenue. So it's more of a pass-through than anything else. And I do have a recommendation, unless there are any questions.
If you can give your recommendation, that'd be great.
Yes, the recommendation is to allow the proposed tariff changes to become effective by operational law on May 16th.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
I also agree.
as do I. Thank you, Mr. Gramlich. Proceeding number 21A-0141E, Mr. Eden, Ms. McLaughlin.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. I'm Michael Eden with your advisory staff. This morning, I'll tee up for your discussion Public Service's proposal for a Stakeholder Performance Incentive Mechanism, or PIM, that the company filed on April 30th, 2024. For the benefit of the listening public, I'll start with some context for this filing. The concept of the stakeholder PIMs was established in the Phase 1 settlement agreement and the Phase 1 decision. The Phase 1 settlement agreement specifically contemplates the development of an emissions reduction PIM, and the Phase 1 decision gives further guidance on the emissions reduction PIM and also requires the development of a PIM addressing Unit 3's O&M expenses, capital cost, and availability factor. In addition, the Phase 1 decision requires Public Service to include a narrative description of Unit 3's planned overhauls when the company submits its proposal for the Unit 3 PIM. As the name implies, these PIMs were to be developed through a stakeholder process. The Phase 1 decision contemplates that Public Service would file a stakeholder PIM proposal. Interested interveners would have 30 days to comment on the PIM proposal, and if contested, the Commission will conduct a limited and expedited hearing regarding the stakeholder PIMs. Because the company filed its stakeholder PIM proposal on April 30th, interested parties are currently have until May 30th to submit feedback. So moving to the actual PIM proposals that Public Service filed at the end of April, Public Service proposes a Unit 3 PIM that incorporates the capital cost, O&M expenses, and availability metrics used in the Phase 2 modeling. At a high level, if Unit 3 has additional capital costs, higher O&M expenses, or a lower availability factor than what the company forecasted, then Public Service could incur a disincentive under the PIM, and vice versa. The company proposes a 10% deadband, a $1 million annual cap on any incentive or disincentive, and a January 1st, 2025 start date for the PIM. The company represents the trial staff of the Commission, Western Resource Advocates, and the Colorado Energy Office either support or do not oppose the Unit 3 PIM. As for the emissions reduction PIM, Public Service states that it has engaged with certain stakeholders but is not yet ready to bring forward an emissions PIM for approval. The company expects to continue engaging stakeholders to try to develop a consensus approach to an emissions PIM, but does not propose a specific filing date. The company goes on to list several challenges in designing the emissions reduction PIM, including how to determine whether the costs incurred to drive additional emissions reductions are reasonable, how to factor in economic growth and beneficial electrification, and what to do in light of uncertainties associated with the upcoming Pueblo Just Transition solicitation. I'll pause here for your discussion on the company's proposed Unit 3 PIM and its statements regarding the development of an emissions reduction PIM, and I'm also available to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Eden. I have two things to put in front of you guys as preliminary matters, and then let you guys take it wherever you want. The first is I'd like to ask the company to make a supplemental filing by May 29th, 2024, providing a detailed description of the actual and planned capital expenditures for Unit 3 from 2023 through 2030, including how this capital spending relates to the projections provided in the company's 2023 and 2024 annual progress reports, as well as in the Phase 2 modeling, and by extension, the baseline for the proposed Unit 3 PIM. So I guess the question is, are you okay with that supplemental filing request? Commissioner Plant?
Yes, I am.
Commissioner Gelman?
Yeah, and I might put a finer point on some of what you suggested. You know, I've spent many hours at this point trying to go through the data from these different sources. The 2023 annual progress report, 2024 annual progress report, as well as what we were told by the company in Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the ERP proceeding. And it is difficult, if not impossible, to line up exact projects, let alone the dates of capital expenditures that the company expects across these different proceeding types, which I think, you know, is a difficulty in starting out in this PIM discussion for us to really all understand where we are with really recent historical expenses as well as the forecasted expenses. So, Chair, if you're interested, I might present a slightly more precisely worded version.
I'm interested.
Because
I'm intrigued.
asking them to relate it might end up with like just as messy of documents as we have right now. So mine's slightly more specific, asking the company to present in one singular document with references to where the numbers come from their base documents, where they originate, the actual and projected expenses for projects from 2023 through 2030, if available. I understand some of those sources only go through, say, 2028. And to be clear, this document should show the company's forecast for capital expenditures, and then to whatever extent available for 2023 and 2024, the actual capital expenditures. And they should present a comparison of the values by project and explain any discrepancies between projected expenditures and actual expenditures. It should clearly distinguish which costs are common versus those that are unique to Unit 3, as well as if the common costs are Comanche 3's share or the totality of those common costs. And it should also identify if the costs that are shown are only public services portion of those costs or a total cost, which would include costs incurred by the other partners in the plant. And they should also identify the reasoning for any major changes in forecasted expenditures by project between values presented across those different documents in different proceedings, once again, which are documents provided in the ERP Phase 1, ERP Phase 2, which, to be clear, is the same proceeding. as well as the 2023 and 2024 annual progress reports. So just a little more specificity on how we want this presented, because I think they could turn around and technically say we have this information. I don't find it usable in the way that it is presented right now. So that is intended to add some more clarity.
I greatly appreciate the friendly and helpful amendment that is far more likely to get us where we're going. Are you okay with that, Commissioner Plant?
Absolutely.
And if you might send whatever you have to Mr. Eden for the order. The second thing I'd like to ask you to consider, and if you support it, the parties to comment upon, is an additional or alternative PIM approach. More specifically, under this alternative approach, we might allow the company to place in the rate base prudently incurred Unit 3 capital expenditures up to whatever level it forecasted as part of the Phase 2 modeling. Under this alternative or addition, for all other prudently incurred capital expenditures over and above the Phase 2 modeling projection, we might treat them like an expense item or apply a one-year amortization period such that the company earns no return. The cost recovery and prudency review would occur at the time of the next rate case. And I'd just say, given all the prior problems with Pueblo Unit 3, I think we should be exploring approaches that limit the company from profiting from their inability to accurately forecast capital and other costs. So would you guys be okay asking for input on this alternative idea, whether it gets implemented here in a future rate case or elsewhere? I'd suggest the company be allowed to provide its input concurrent with the updates it provides on Unit 3, and that other parties could respond in addition to any other comments they have on the PIM. So I guess, Commissioner Plant, it's an idea asking for comment from the party, since I don't think we have a record here, but see what the parties think.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I support that.
Commissioner Gellman?
Just to make sure I'm clear, so the suggestion is just to get comments on an alternative or testimony, I think, as it might be in this proceeding, on the concept of if they're over, essentially they're forecasted, depends what document you look at. I'll just point out previous one.
Right.
But if they're over the forecasted amount in a given year, you're saying you'd like comments on the idea of just 1 year amortization with no carrying cost or WACC.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm curious. I think we'd have to consider what if it's a really large capital expenditure.
Well,
I mean, I know in the decision we had indicated, I don't know the dollar value off the top of my head. I want to say 20 million or something like this. A certain dollar value, they're supposed to come to the commission immediately, given that it's nearing its retirement. So maybe that a little bit guards against the idea. I just worry about the rate impact if it was a really large capital, but people will give us their thoughts.
Right. And we're not guaranteeing recovery. It's only if it's prudently incurred. It's just a way to stop, stop profiting from, expenses from capital investments that are significantly larger than what they're telling us.
Yeah.
Potentially.
No, that's an idea. I'm fine to ask for that. It's interesting in the information too, like some of these capital will move from year to year, so I think the smoothing effect of that and how a PIM works, I don't anticipate like posing an official question, but I'm interested in how do you deal with, if capital just moves from 1 year to another, are you giving a bonus and then giving a penalty when really it's the same project? It's just moved from year to year. If you're over in a certain year, do you just keep going since the maximum penalty is set at 1 million in this proposal? So, I have some questions about the lumpiness of how this works and if really on an annual basis is appropriate, but I'm sure we can get into that as we move forward with the proceeding. I don't see posing an exact question on that, but I'm fine with you posing your question.
Thanks to both of you. That's all I have. Do you have anything else before we move on this? Commissioner Plant? Commissioner Gilman?
I mean, it's probably hard to overstate my frustration in not seeing an emissions reduction PIM. So trying to find the right words here. Which I don't have a lot. I will be honest, I'm actually blown away that they did not propose that after years of that being what was directed by the commission. So I think we have to consider what we do about that. Sitting here today, I would say I was incredibly shocked to see them say that they just need more time. It has literally been years. And we fast-tracked other PIMs that I think, in all honesty, are less important and kind of nest under and create this sort of friction where now we have all these other PIMs and they're like, well, gee whiz, it might, we have to look at the interaction. Well, that was the reason to think of this one from the beginning. So that we didn't have to come back after the fact and think of all the weird interactions. So just really frustrated by that. And I think we're going to have to consider, I see, greenhouse gas reduction in the electric sector as one of the absolute biggest policy priorities that we have. And to not have any performance around that exact aspect, and I think the cost effectiveness of getting there and of sticking to their plan as they have presented it is incredibly troubling to me. And I think it's troubling that we don't have a priority from the company to focus on what the commission has asked them to focus on. So I don't know. I don't know where exactly we go now, but clearly it's an area that I intend to continue to focus on and find whatever avenue we have to move forward with some sort of performance rate making in this regard.
Commissioner Plant, anything? Do you want to add anything to that, Commissioner Plant?
No, not really. I agree wholeheartedly. I think this is sort of, the basis of some of the discussion that we've been having in another proceeding around.
And we'll be having.
And we'll be having around, sort of a frustration around trying to get these things done that we keep asking for. So hopefully we can start to move forward on it, but I do share your frustration, Commissioner Gilman.
Commissioner Gilman, are you proposing any language in this order, or how would you like to proceed?
Yeah, if Mr. Zadi and Mr. Eden allow me, of course. It's hard to let it go. I don't think you can say nothing. It's shocking and really, really disappointing that we've gone years and haven't gotten anywhere, and I would certainly appreciate if that's reflected.
Ms. McLaughlin, I'm thinking you're going to want this to be an ABC order given the deadlines.
Timing is tight, given the comment timeline that we're hopeful for here. But I do think, commissioners, if you agree with Commissioner Gilman's language, that some expression of the statements that were made today and also an invitation, since we are seeking additional comments, if you agree to include language here to encourage comments, including on that emissions reduction PIM, or rather the lack thereof, would be something appropriate for this order that we can capture.
Appreciate it. And I just would have one response, Commissioner Gilman, which is I personally appreciate your willingness to allow the cost alignment PIMs to move forward in the interim. I just think we're going to have a way better outcome because we've aligned the company's incentives and asked them to manage to what they told us. So I know it's far from perfect, but I just want to express my appreciation for allowing those other cost control PIMs to go forward. So I don't know, Mr. Eden, does that give you what you need for now?
I think so. So the concept is to include language in the decision expressing some of that frustration, invite the parties to comment on the lack of the emissions reductions plan. I guess the one clarifying question I would have is, I'm assuming that the commission would like the company in its supplemental filing for that to take the form of written testimony consistent with the company's earlier stakeholder proposal that it filed on April 30th.
I think that would give us the best record. Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see what the parties respond by. But I think that'd be better than written comments. So if they could provide a witness, I think that would be really helpful. Commissioner Gilman, any thoughts on the witness, or are you okay with an ABC order?
Yeah, I'm fine with those taking the form of testimony, and you're welcome for the those containment PIMs. I mean, look, that's part of the equation, right? But what's missing from the entire equation is a lot of the work Commissioner Plant's been doing on BPPs, and how do you get to this future in the most cost-effective way? You know, and I think an overarching rather than piecemeal approach is much better, as I've stated for years.
Anything you want to add, Commissioner Plant? Nope. All right, I think that can be an ABC order. Request. Yeah, go ahead.
I did have a couple other points just in light of the new supplemental filing that the commission required.
Yep.
We would recommend that the commission set a new deadline for interveners to provide their feedback. Specifically, we suggest pushing their current deadline, which is May 30th, back to June 7th, 2024. And we would recommend that the commission clarify that any feedback from intervening parties regarding the company's stakeholder PIM also be in the form of written testimony, again, to ensure clarity of record.
You okay with encourage? Strongly encourage, require. I guess I'm okay with that, Commissioner Plant. Those two last points.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Commissioner Gilman.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Eden's suggestion.
Anything else, Mr. Eden?
No, I think we're good unless Mr. McLaughlin has anything else.
No, I think that's good, and thank you for the clarification. And we'll include the testimony from both the parties and from the company from this conversation.
Thanks to the both of you. Proceeding number 21A -0625 EG. Ms. Crandall, Mr. Acera.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Kelly Crandall with the advisory staff. Decision number C22-0678 was issued November 3rd, 2022, and it approved an unopposed comprehensive settlement agreement for Public Services 2022 to 2025 Renewable Energy Standard Plan with some additions and clarifications. And the settlement provided for up to 300 megawatts in community solar garden capacity, of which 70 megawatts would be applied to a competitive RFP and 210 megawatts would be allocated in standard offer programs. And both of those processes include general capacity and capacity allocated for income qualified or disproportionately impacted community subscribers. In approving the settlement, the Commission raised concerns about the scale and cost of the CSG programs and directed the company to file a motion after the competitive process ended that provided information on the prices they received, the bidders' customer acquisition plans, and the calculation of standard offer pricing prior to moving forward. So accordingly, the item before you all today is Public Services February 26th motion regarding community solar garden programs, through which it seeks a determination that its final non-participant costs are reasonable and that it's authorized to move forward with the standard offer program. It also seeks a determination that developers' customer acquisition approaches are reasonable and, if needed, approval for some process refinements for interconnection. So Public Service awarded 8 general RFP projects with a weighted average bid price of -$34 per megawatt hour, and 9 projects for income qualified and disproportionately impacted community subscribers with a weighted average bid price of $15 a megawatt hour. The motion also proposes the motion also proposes incentive levels for the standard offer programs derived from weighted average prices for winning bids, and those are going to step down over 70 megawatt capacity tranches. With regard to customer acquisition and program offerings, the company provided bid application materials for winning bids in a highly confidential attachment, although it states that it has limited oversight for developers and there aren't a lot of formal rules or regulations on the level of detail to be provided. And then finally, the company submitted attachment 3, which updates the process of evaluating CSG projects for interconnection, which was based on collaborative conversations with the Colorado Solar and Storage Association and Solar Energy Industries Association and other entities. COSACIA also provided a conferral statement summarizing the agreed to process as not perfect for industry, but reflecting a balance of objectives that will be assessed between the tranches of standard offer capacity. So public service represents the motion as unopposed, and accordingly it seeks to waive response time. So I'm happy to answer questions or provide a recommendation.
So I just, before we talk about it and vote, I just want to raise one frustration. And I mean, in general, I think the pricing's fine, and I'm going to vote to support it. But I do want to talk about one change circumstance, some frustration, and I want to start from a big picture perspective. In the ERP case, we learned that the company wants to invest $2 to $3 billion in new transmission because in the last ERP, there wasn't enough dispatchable generation bid into the Denver metro area to meet summer peak demands between the hours of 6 and 9 p.m. The company is also telling the financial community it's investing $5 billion over the next 5 years in new distributions, and also seems likely to propose $1 billion plus investment in new gas-fired combustion turbines. And from what we saw in the phase 2 case, most of these investments seem to be driven largely by 6 to 9 p.m. Summer peak demands. So here we have in front of us a 200 megawatt plus proposal for standalone solar that appears to do little to help avoid any of this probably close to $10 billion investment, as most solar CSGs generate little energy after 6 to 7 p.m., even in the summer. In my former life, I was always proud to be a solar developer, as I thought solar could significantly reduce expensive and volatile fossil fuel generation. But as we squeeze up to 85% of the fossil fuel off the system by 2030, and now I'm quoting company witness Mr. Landrum, supplemental direct testimony from the ERP, he says new CSGs mainly curtail or replace large-scale solar on a one-for-one basis. You know, my frustration with this is that we need dispatchable generation in the Denver metro transmission constrained region to avoid new generation transmission and distribution. And by adding storage to the standalone solar CSGs, instead of just doing standalone solar, that would give us a dispatchable resource, most likely where and when we need it. But for whatever reason, we just never seem to get there, like emissions bins and on-bill financing. I know the company doesn't directly profit from this, and that there was an analysis in this case showing that adding storage could be expensive. But since then, we've had multi-billion-dollar transmission spending arise seemingly out of nowhere, and these CSG and other programs often seem structured to compete as little as possible with a company's capital investment plans. So with apologies for my expression of frustration, just any thoughts about including some language about the need, desire, and interest to start moving towards dispatchable generation and perhaps away from standalone solar. So since you heard this case originally, maybe I'll start with you, Commissioner Gilman, and then turn to you, Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point you're bringing up, if I'm to paraphrase, is that increasingly, the value of a resource on the system will be around, if it includes likely storage and is dispatchable for hours that don't involve prime sunshine hours. I think that's probably an accurate picture. And so it seems like if I'm getting it right, the message you'd like to spend, not with any, the message you'd like to send, not with a requirement, but just with language here, is that, I think as we look forward and increasingly the value of CSGs to the system will be, somewhat contingent upon if they're able to also provide some level of dispatchable resource. Is that a fair kind of rephrasing or summary?
Yes.
I think that largely represents the realities of the system and is fair warning for what we see coming in terms of what will drive value on the system to, you know, if they have an interest to maximize this value for them and their subscribers, I think that's fair.
Commissioner Plant, comments, thoughts?
Well, we each have our own frustrations. That's
So,
yeah,
just
I think as you know, we've said in other proceedings, you know, flexibility is the predominant value here. And I think that, you know, throughout our system in various different ways, and, you know, it seems to be coming up in, you know, almost every case. That's the case, is flexibility is key. And I think that your observations are right on. And, you know, I would just say, you know, the idea that they're thrown out because it's too expensive is, you know, begs the question, and compared to what? You know, we saw some pretty expensive projections of costs to serve the Denver metro system. And if we can avoid those through, you know, strategic investments, I think that's probably a good thing for us to do. So I support that language.
And I guess, would you vote to approve the company's motion?
Yeah, I would. And the other aspect of this, and I think this, you know, goes again to sort of future, as we're looking at future proceedings, and you know, a lot of this, there was legislation this year on CSG, and so I'm sure things are going to change going forward in different ways. And I know that this started, I think, in 21, right? And I think that the settlement came in, you know, 22 in the summer sometime maybe. And that was the same time the IRA was coming out. And I would really like in the future for the parties to look at any barriers to maximizing the benefits that can be derived, or the financial benefits and savings that can be derived from the IRA. I mean, one that comes to mind is the requirement that 100% of the subscribers in a low income, for a low income solar garden be low income. And what we've seen is that the threshold for the IRA is 50%. So if we can drive down the costs of solar gardens by, you know, splitting those, you know, that benefits everybody. But right now, based on the rules, we can't do that. Or I don't know if it's rules or if it's just policy. And you know, throughout the, you know, the process, looking at ways in which, you know, domestic content and energy impacted communities and all the various different things that could actually provide those financial benefits to these systems. I think that's something that I'd like the parties to look at in the future.
I'd be a strong supporter of putting that in the order, and I think the new legislation, which is not currently binding yet, but is coming, puts further impetus behind, you know, both our concerns. But I guess, Commissioner Gilman, I think we need a formal vote from you, and any comments on Commissioner Plant's request.
Yeah, I support Ms. Crandall's recommendation as well as each of your additions.
Does that give you what you need, Ms. Crandall?
I believe so. Just the one clarification. Are you all okay with the waiver of response time being considered moot? So it would be otherwise approved.
I think so. I see Commissioner Plant nodding yes. Commissioner Gilman? Yes. Thumbs up from Commissioner Gilman.
And I believe I'm clear on what kinds of language you all would like included. Are you all right with ABC?
I am. Yes.
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 Commissioner Gilman? Yep.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Proceeding number 23AL-0243E, Ms. Friedman, Ms. Harper.
Morning, Commissioners. I'm Allie Friedman of your advisory staff, and with me today is Commission Counsel Ruthie Harper. This issue is part of the Phase 2 electric rate case that Public Service had filed last year. And I'll start with a little bit of background. In February of this year, the Commission issued decision number C240117 in this proceeding, approving the use of probability of dispatch peak hours, that's POD/PH, cost allocation methodology for all public service generation plant, transmission, and distribution substation costs. The Commission rejected the 4 critical peak average and excess demand 4CP AED methodology that had previously been used by the company. In March, the Colorado Energy Consumers, CEC, federal executive agencies, FEA, Walmart, and Climax Company each filed RRR on the cost allocation methodology for transmission and distribution substations, requesting approval of 4CP AED for those costs. After considering the RRR, the Commission issued decision number C240225 on April 11th, authorizing 4CP AED cost allocation methodology for transmission and distribution substation costs. Specifically, in decision number C240225, the Commission acknowledged that the 4CP AED allocator falls short in terms of the limited number of hours it relies upon for cost allocation, but the Commission also determined that the evidence of the record tends to support 4CP AED relative to alternatives presented. The Commission also stated that its approval of the 4CP AED allocator here does not signal a precedent for future electric rate cases submitted by Public Service, and the Commission stated its expectation that in the future, Public Service provide more clarity and analysis of the drivers of the costs for transmission and distribution substation investments. On May 1st, Energy Outreach Colorado, EOC, filed an application for RRR requesting the Commission reconsider authorizing the 4CP AED for transmission and distribution substation costs. On May 7th, CEC filed a motion for leave to respond, request to waive response time and response to Energy Outreach Colorado's RRR. And on May 13th, EOC filed a response to CEC's motion. So first to EOC's application for RRR. EOC requests the Commission reverse its previous decision on RRR and order 4CP AED be used for transmission costs and POD/PH be authorized for distribution substation costs. In support of its request, EOC cites the Commission's deliberations in the first RRR, noting that the Commission discussed the use of 4CP AED as being, quote, a little less wrong than POD/PH. EOC contends that the use of 4CP AED results in $12.3 million in revenue requirement shift to the residential class, and argues that 4CP AED has a diminishing connection to modern system cost drivers. EOC calculates that using POD/PH for distribution system cost means a $2.9 million reduction to the residential class cost allocation. EOC also cites the Commission's April RRR deliberations, in which the Commission discussed the lack of evidence in the record to adopt 4CP AED as more accurate than the POD/PH, and notes that the Commission did not discuss the $12.3 million shift to the residential class. EOC concludes that the Commission's RRR deliberations confirm the Commission's initial determination that the cost allocation methodology for transmission and distribution substations should be the same as used in the production assets. EOC states that witnesses for FEA and Climax testified during this proceeding that 4CP AED is not a good fit for distribution system investments. EOC emphasizes its witness Chernick's testimony that the record in this proceeding does not support an ideal allocator for transmission and distribution substation costs, thus a broad allocator reflecting the variety of hours that contribute to the peak hours is appropriate. EOC maintains a middle-of-the-road approach is appropriate, with distribution substation costs allocated using POD/PH methodology and transmission assets allocated with 4CP AED. Given the Commission's authorization in decision number C240225 of different cost allocation for transmission and substations from that used for production assets, EOC encourages the Commission to untie cost allocation methodologies for transmission from that of distribution substations. EOC also requests the Commission modify Decision C-24-0225, changing its expectation that public service will provide comprehensive studies on class contributions to transmission and distribution substations in its next Phase 2 rate case to an actual directive that the company do so, using advised meter infrastructure data. So before we get to the merits for the application for RRR, I'll turn this over to Commission Counsel Ruthie Harper to address the parties' motions to respond.
Ms.
Good
Harper.
morning, commissioners. For preliminary decision today is whether to grant the motion filed by CEC requesting leave to respond to EOC's RRR. CEC claims a response to the RRR is warranted under Rule 1506B because EOC, it alleges, introduces a new allocation approach based on facts not in evidence. CEC states the record lacks any evidence offered from any party recommending this approach. CEC also requests the Commission find times of the essence and waive remaining response time to the motion, particularly since public service has already put these rates into effect. EOC filed a response opposing the request to waive response time and opposing CEC's request for leave to respond. EOC urges if the Commission does allow CEC's response, then it should reject the assertion that its RRR introduces a new allocation approach based on facts not in the record, noting both the POD PH and 4CP AED cost allocation methodologies were contemplated for generation, transmission, and distribution substation assets. EOC further contends the record demonstrates that other parties and EOC's witness in particular contemplated use of different allocation methodologies for these assets. I could pause here or proceed to a recommendation.
If you can make a recommendation, that'd be great.
I recommend waiving the remaining response time and taking up CEC's motion today and allowing the response. As CEC indicated, time is of the essence to resolve this matter. The record is closed and rates are in effect, so there is no reason to prolong the discussion on cost allocation methodologies beyond what is before the Commission at this time. Further, EOC has provided a response which can be considered today when evaluating CEC's motion. As to leave to respond, I recommend finding that CEC's response is warranted and that allowing it will assist the Commission in resolving the issues raised in the RRR. I see no prejudice in allowing the response. The additional briefing in the response and EOC's response in opposition provide the Commission a fuller picture of this issue, which may help it reach its decision today. So I'll pause here for your vote, whether you agree to waive remaining response time and to grant CEC's request for leave to respond.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Govan,
I also agree.
as do I. Ms. Friedman.
So in its response to Energy Outreach Colorado's RRR, CEC argues that EOC's proposal to use separate cost allocation methodologies for transmission costs and for distribution substation costs is inappropriate because none of the parties in this proceeding, nor the Commission, have been able to review or consider this cost allocation strategy with a possible outcome of rates that are not just or reasonable and lack any evidentiary basis. CEC states that EOC misrepresents the testimony of witnesses for Climax and FEA, noting that both Climax and FEA supported using 4CP AED for substations in their post-hearing pleadings. CEC also rejects as misleading EOC's characterization of the shift of $12.3 million to residential customers, arguing that because 4CP AED has been the methodology used prior to this proceeding, its authorized use here is a continuation of the prior practice, and that the 4CP AED methodology prevents a shift of cost to commercial and industrial customer classes. CEC argues that following EOC's recommendation would result in an inappropriate cost shift to these customers and would undermine rate stability. CEC also contends that EOC's middle-of-the-road approach ignores the balance the Commission already has established with regard to cost allocation methodologies across production, transmission, and distribution substations. In its response, EOC rejects CEC's assertion that EOC's RRR introduces new allocation approach based on facts, not in evidence, noting that both POD/PH and 4CP AED cost allocation methodologies were contemplated for generation, transmission, and substation assets. EOC further contends the record demonstrates that other parties and EOC's witnesses in particular contemplated the use of different cost allocation methodologies, and points to CEC's advocacy in its March RRR filing for 4CP AED to be used for transmission and distribution substations, contrary to position in testimony and statement of position that 4CP AED be used for all assets. I can make a recommendation or turn the discussion to the commissioners at this time.
I think we'd welcome a recommendation.
So advisors recommend denying EOC's application for RRR. We share the concern of CEC that EOC's advocacy through RRR for this allocation methodology comes too late in this proceeding to be properly considered or vetted by the commission and the parties, let alone adequately supported by the record. The commission has already deliberated on this allocation issue twice in this proceeding and has determined that the rates resulting from the authorized cost allocation methodology are just and reasonable rates, and public service has put those rates into effect. Given this, we recommend finding that EOC's RRR fails to provide grounds that compel the commission now to revisit the well-reasoned and supported approach it already adopted in decision number C-240225.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
I also agree.
as do I, and that can be an ABC decision, waiving response time, granting the CEC motion to respond, and denying the application for RRR. So thank you, Ms. Friedman. Proceeding number 23A-0244E, Mr. Eden, Mr. Gomez.
Good morning again. I'm still Michael Eden with your Commission advisory staff. Before you this morning is the Transportation Electrification Plan, or TEP, for Black Hills, Colorado Electric, and specifically the application for rehearing, re-argument, or reconsideration decision number C-24-0219, which I'll refer to as the second round RRR, that Colorado Energy Office, or CEO, filed on April 29th, 2024. CEO's second round RRR relates to one of the most contested issues in Black Hills TEP, which is the income qualified, or IQ, EV purchase rebate program. Under this program, IQ customers are eligible for $2,500 rebates for the purchase of new or used EVs. There's a similar rebate program for e-bikes called the IQ e-bike pilot program. In the Commission's decision addressing exceptions to the recommended decision in this proceeding, you required Black Hills to administer the IQ EV purchase rebates and the e-bike rebates at the point of sale, consistent with CEO's position. Black Hills filed RRR that decision, requesting that the Commission clarify that the point of sale rebate programs are limited to certain dealerships and bike shops. In the first RRR decision, issued on April 9th, the Commission granted the company's RRR and limited point of sale rebates to dealerships and bicycle shops within Black Hills service territory that offer new EVs or e-bikes, as well as one dealership in Colorado Springs. Now, in its second round RRR that is before you today, CEO asks that the Commission, quote, direct Black Hills to prioritize retailers in the company's service territory and authorize Black Hills to expand that territory on a reasonable retailer by retailer basis based on EV or e-bike availability and manufacturer diversity, end quote. CEO argues that allowing Black Hills to expand the geographic area for dealerships and bike shops increases flexibility and will provide Black Hills customers with more options, thereby contributing to the success of the programs. For example, CEO asserts that certain EV manufacturers have no dealerships in Black Hills service territory, but do have locations in nearby Colorado Springs, and that by expanding the available dealerships, you'll provide more options to Black Hills customers to purchase EVs that qualify for the federal tax rebate. So the decision is simply whether to grant CEO's second round RRR. I can answer any questions you might have, but I also have a recommendation.
You can give your recommendation, that'd be great.
Advisors recommend denying CEO's second round RRR. Black Hills approved TEP contemplates a limited number of point of sale rebates, about 28 rebates for EVs and 60 e-bike rebates. Rather than continuing to evaluate which dealerships and bike shops the company should work with to implement the point of sale rebates, Black Hills should focus on quickly implementing the point of sale rebates at the bike shops and dealerships the company identified in its first round RRR. CEO suggests that the Commission's first RRR decision unnecessarily prohibits Black Hills from voluntarily expanding the dealerships and bike shops with which the company implements the point of sale rebate programs. CEO doesn't acknowledge, however, that it was Black Hills who requested the clear geographic limitations in the first RRR decision. Advisors see little benefit to providing Black Hills unwanted flexibility to expand the scope of point of sale rebate programs. Such an expansion risks wasting time and resources trying to identify the perfect group of dealerships and bike shops instead of actually commencing the point of sale rebate programs. In sum, the Commission should deny CEO's second round RRR and stick with the clear parameters that Black Hills proposed and the Commission approved in the first RRR decision.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
I also agree.
as do I, and that can be an ABC decision, Mr. Eden, denying the RRR application. Proceeding number 23A-0330E, Public Service Company of Colorado, EDR rate. Mr. Davis, Ms. Rosati.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Ron Davis of the Commission's advisory staff, and I'm going to be joined this morning by Wendy Rosati, Commission Counsel. And this morning, we'd like to present exceptions to decision number R24-168 that grants, in part, Public Service Company of Colorado's application for approval of an economic development rate for QTS Aurora infrastructure. QTS plans to build and operate a data center campus. The facility is expected to consist of 4 individual data center buildings on an 80-acre site in Aurora, Colorado. The site will have an average estimated total load of approximately 160 megawatts at full capacity, ramped into over a period of 5 to 10 years. Tenant clients will contract with QTS for capacity within the campus. QTS anticipates that all 4 buildings will be complete by 2033, with the first building energized around the end of this year. Given the large new load, Public Service also seeks a formal determination that no certificate of public convenience and necessity is required for the company to construct and operate a 1.4-mile dedicated double-circuit 230 kV transmission line and associated transmission facilities that will connect to QTS's planned data center campus. Or, in the alternative, the company requests authority to build the transmission facilities by the Commission granting a CPCN for the project. Public Service states that through the proposed EDR contract, QTS is committed to taking electric service for the company for a minimum of 10 years, subject to receiving a percentage discount off standard base rates under Schedule Transmission General, or Schedule TG. Public Service states that the structure of the contract and the company's tariff ensure that no other customers will cross-subsidize QTS. Along these lines, the company calculates the marginal cost to serve QTS and explains how the EDR contract will be treated in future rate cases and in electric commodity adjustment filings. Public Service has also entered into a transmission facilities construction service agreement with QTS. And under this TSA, Public Service will construct, own, and operate the QTS transmission facilities. And the TSA provides that QTS is required to pay Public Service for the total cost of these additional facilities. All of the $28.1 million estimated costs will be paid for before the transmission facilities go into service, which is expected to occur by the end of the 4th quarter of this year. Public Service states that the terms of the TSA have been negotiated such that no other customers will cover the costs of these transmission facilities, even in the event those costs ultimately exceed current estimates. Public Service's application filing includes letters of support from the City of Aurora and the Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade. Now, for some background here, Economic development rates for certain retail electric customers are allowed under what is called the EDR statute. The specific provisions that apply to this case are sections 40-3, 104.3, 5 through 8. The statutory requirements for an EDR offering guide this case, and there are essentially three things for the Commission to consider. First, is QTS eligible to receive an economic development rate? Second, does the discounted rate that QTS will receive exceed the cost for public service to serve QTS, even if that rate is less than the tariff rates that would otherwise apply to QTS as a transmission general customer? And third, are other terms and conditions required so that other customers are adequately protected, or in other words, so that other customers don't unlawfully subsidize QTS? The recommended decision addresses each of these 3 points. ALJ Harris Adams concludes that QTS is eligible to receive an economic development rate, that the discounted rate, including certain riders being excluded from the bills, exceeds the marginal cost to serve QTS, and that the intervening parties in this case have failed to show that it is necessary for the Commission to adopt additional terms and conditions for QTS to receive service under the proposed contracts in order to prevent unlawful subsidization. Exceptions to this recommended decision were filed by trial staff of the Commission, the Colorado Office of the Utility Consumer Advocate, and the Colorado Energy Consumers, or CEC, a group of large electricity customers that were also a part of the proceeding that an earlier proceeding on today's agenda. The exceptions take issue with the eligibility and the discounted rate and service contract. The granting of the CPCN for the transmission facilities is not in dispute. In the interest of time, Ms. Rosati and I are going to move to the presenting of the exceptions without further background. We'll go issue by issue unless there are questions or interest in discussing the matter now.
Now, if you could jump into it. Ms. Rosati.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'll present staff's 3 exceptions and our recommendations for each. Staff's first exception concerns the eligibility of QTS, a master meter operator, to receive an EDR. Staff asserts that QTS itself will have minimal electricity requirements, while its tenants under the master meter operator arrangement will collectively have much larger loads. Staff points to section 40-3-104.3, subsection 7 of the Colorado Revised Statutes, which states that a qualifying commercial or industrial customer eligible for an EDR agreement means a, quote, utility customer that agrees to locate operations in Colorado and add at least 3 megawatts of new load, and which demonstrates that the cost of electricity and availability of an EDR is a substantial or critical consideration in deciding where to locate operations. The statute further specifies that a qualifying customer does not include a customer that agrees to relocate or otherwise transfer its existing load of at least 3 megawatts from one public utility service territory to another's. Staff states that the statute's eligibility provision focuses on the addition of new load. Staff argues that QTS is ineligible because QTS's load could actually be existing load transferred from other locations, as QTS's tenants have not been identified. Staff argues that the recommended decision, which found QTS is an eligible customer, renders the concept of adding new load superfluous in contravention of statutory interpretation principles. Staff concludes that granting the application would result in an unprecedented policy change of the Commission allowing a non-regulated entity to determine who receives the benefits of the EDR statute. Staff states that the Commission should deny the application due to this issue with the master meter operator arrangement. Public Service responds that staff's argument lacks merit and is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how MMOs operate and the statute and rules that govern MMOs or master meter operators. Public Service argues that as a matter of law, QTS is the only customer of public service that the Commission should be concerned with. Public Service continues that staff's argument that some entity elsewhere in Colorado could improperly move load to QTS's facility as a tenant is both speculative and irrelevant, again, because QTS is the only customer that should be considered. Public Service further states QTS will have direct control over load used for cooling, which will be approximately 30 to 40% of the projected 165 megawatts of load. So even if load directly caused by QTS's tenants is excluded, Public Service states that QTS easily exceeds the 3 megawatt statutory threshold because of these cooling needs. QTS's response to staff's exception echoes Public Services' response. QTS states that it, and not its tenants, will be Public Services customer, and that it meets the EDR eligibility requirements. And with that background, I can pause for questions or offer a recommendation.
If you can offer a quick recommendation, that'd be great.
I'm not persuaded by staff's interpretation of the statute. The plain language of section 40-3-104.3, subsection 7, attaches eligibility at the utility customer level, and master meter operators are not precluded from being a utility customer for the purposes of an EDR. In this situation, the utility customer is QTS, not the tenants, and QTS meets the statutory requirements. Therefore, I recommend the Commission reject staff's exceptions on this point and agree with the ALJ that QTS is eligible for the economic development rate.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
I also agree.
as do I.
Thank you. Staff's second and third exceptions ask the Commission to deny the application based on consideration of two policy concerns: increased greenhouse gas emissions and potential harm to disproportionately impacted communities. Regarding the emissions argument, staff acknowledges that the EDR statute does not impose an emission limit or requirement on EDR customers, and that the statute does not specifically prohibit increased greenhouse gas emissions due to an EDR customer load. However, staff argues that the Commission should consider that service to QTS under the EDR contract will increase greenhouse gas emissions and make it more difficult for the company to reach its 2030 emission reduction goals. Public Service responds that it has confirmed that QTS's load will not compromise the company's ability to meet the state's emission reduction goals. The company included QTS's load in its updated load and resources table in the 120-day report in the ERP Clean Energy Plan in proceeding number 21A-0141E. Public Service further adds that as a legal matter, marginal emissions are beyond the scope of this proceeding because the EDR statute is silent as to emissions from EDR customers. Regarding the potential harm to disproportionately impacted communities, staff argues that authorizing the EDR for unknown tenant customers could have unintended consequences, such as the potential to negatively affect disproportionately impacted communities. For example, if a company located in such a community relocates to obtain the EDR. In response, Public Service states staff's arguments have no factual support. Public Service also states that nothing in the EDR statute requires a utility to select EDR customers based on specific geographic criteria, and that the Commission rejected arguments about geographic criteria in proceeding number 20A-0345E. And I can pause for questions, or I'm prepared with a recommendation.
Yeah, if you can give your recommendation, that'd be great.
I recommend the Commission deny staff's exceptions on these points. Staff's arguments regarding increased emissions are unpersuasive, and Public Services analysis shows that the company will be able to meet its emission reduction targets while serving QTS. Staff's arguments regarding potential harm to disproportionately impacted communities are similarly unsupported by the record. And consistent with the ALJ's legal analysis, there is no basis to consider impacts on greenhouse gas emissions or locational impacts with regard to the approval of the EDR contract because Public Service has met its burdens to support the application in accordance with the plain language of the EDR statute.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation on both exceptions.
Commissioner Gilman,
I also agree.
as do I.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Mr. Davis now.
Mr. Davis.
Thank you. There are two decision points that relate to the discounted rate being offered to QTS. The first is whether the Commission should alter the negotiated terms of the contract by modifying the discount level to base rates. And the second is whether to require QTS to pay two rate riders that are proposed to be excluded from QTS's bills, namely the Purchase Capacity Cost Adjustment, or PCCA, and the Transmission Cost Adjustment, or TCA. I'll present both issues and set up the votes for discussion. In its exceptions, UCA recommends that the Commission alter the discount afforded to QTS to 15% from the otherwise applicable base rates for the first 5 years of the contract, and then to a 10% discount for the last 5 years. UCA argues that these modifications will serve as an additional protection for non-EDR customers against cross-subsidization, and promotes the public interest and increases the likelihood that the rate is just and reasonable. In its response, Public Service argues that the Commission does not have the power to rewrite contracts in the absence of directives or requirements in statute or rules. The company further states that the Commission should not rewrite contracts after the fact simply because it or a party might have picked different terms had they been one of the negotiating parties. The company concludes that the ALJ correctly found that the discounted rate for QTS complies with relevant laws and rules, and that the statute provides no mechanism or mandate to rewrite contract terms. QTS likewise responds that Public Service and QTS negotiated contracts that comply with the statute and include a discount that is above the company's marginal cost to serve QTS. According to QTS, the company showing that the EDR is above marginal cost is all that is required by statute to protect other customers. QTS agrees with the recommended decision, stating that UCA has not demonstrated that the discounted rate will be below marginal cost and that the Commission must therefore require additional protections. In its exceptions, CEC objects to the exclusion of the TCA from the charges QTS will pay. CEC states in its exceptions that staff and UCA support and join CEC's exceptions. In essence, CEC argues that the proposed contract violates the statute because it is necessary for QTS to pay the TCA and the PCCA to avoid prohibited subsidization. CEC contends that QTS will not pay its fair share of the TCA and PCCA, which inherently increases the cost to all other customers in violation of the statute. CEC states that QTS will rely on the company's entire system of generation capacity and transmission resources, and that should thus pay for the cost of these resources when they are recovered through the TCA and PCCA. CEC also notes that QTS will pay for these investments when they are eventually rolled into base rates, but not pay for those same costs when they are collected through the riders. CEC concludes that the recommended decision implicitly requires non-EDR customers to pick up QTS's share. CEC further argues that the weight of the record evidence shows that Public Service failed to meet its burden with regard to excusing QTS from paying those two riders. CEC contends that Public Service simply relied on the Commission's decision in proceeding number 20A345E regarding how standard EDR contracts would treat the TCA and PCCA, whereas the intervening parties in this proceeding have shown by the preponderance of evidence that QTS will benefit from but not pay for transmission and generation capacity that will be used to serve QTS. In response, Public Service states that the company's modeling shows that QTS is projected to pay greater than the modeled marginal cost of all the generation, transmission, and distribution needed to serve QTS, even though the EDR contracts includes a discount from base rates and also excludes QTS from the TCA and PCCA. Public Service argues that its modeling and extensive discussion of marginal cost and subsidization issues readily satisfied the company's burden to show compliance with the statute. Public Service adds that while staff and UCA did file answer testimony, they did not present alternative calculations of marginal costs, and thus they did not meet their burden to rebut the company's modeling. So here the Commission is being asked whether the Commission should modify the discount level to base rates, and is being asked to require QTS to pay the PCCA and the TCA. I can move to a recommendation if you'd like, answer questions, or listen to your discussion.
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in first and then look forward to hearing where you guys are coming from. For me, given the UCA and CEC exceptions, I'm struggling to see why we should exempt EDR customers for paying their pro rata share of the TCA and PCCA. I know that the TCA was included in the company's marginal cost analysis, but one of the primary takeaways for me from the last ERP process is that we clearly don't fully understand how new load creates a need for expensive new transmission. As such, there seems to be substantial uncertainty surrounding the marginal cost analysis, particularly on the transmission side. Given where we're at in this case with a fully negotiated contract and a well-reasoned ALJ decision, I'd probably let the deal stand as is, but would like to see if you guys would support including language in this order, discouraging or even prohibiting to the extent we can the company from exempting any future EDR customer from paying their pro rata share of the TCA and PCCA. I'm also concerned that this agreement, particularly the extent of the discount, is as much driven by the company's financial incentives to invest in the new generation and transmission, and not necessarily getting the best possible deal for non-participating customers. So I propose including language in this decision expressing that concern and putting the company and future EDR customers on notice that subsequent deals at these rate discount levels are likely to be more highly scrutinized, especially as our load and resource balance tightens and the need for new transmission increases. Finally, going forward in the context of the next filing, I think we need to be clearer about what happens if we get to a reliability event, and would like to explore having in these EDR contract something that gives the company an enhanced right to limit, curtail, or interrupt service under certain condition. I assume there's a waterfall of load shedding as the system is put under strain, and for these large loads seeking discounted rates, I think we need to discuss having them be placed higher up the curtailment list than other customers that don't have the rate discount. Instead of building more CTs, more natural gas-fired combustion turbines and transmission to meet these loads, some flexibility on the absoluteness of the obligation to serve for these large new EDR customers with discounted rates may be better policy. So those are my issues on this, more or less letting this existing deal go forward as is, but trying to set in place significantly more structure, as the load and resources balance tighten, and as we see these types of loads cause the need for expensive new transmission. So I'll stop there, see if wherever you'd like to take it, Commissioner Plan, on my comments or any others you'd like to offer.
Yeah, I would agree with the recommendation and also your additions. I think that, and I have one of my own later along the same lines, and I think it's good for us to give some direction for future ones since this is an early one, and I agree with that language.
Commissioner Gilman?
Yeah, I struggle with the whole thing entirely, to be perfectly honest with you. With respect to the DI comments that were brought up before, I mean, it's a difficult situation to look at. Substantial rate discounts for the largest customers when we know we have a lot of customers struggling as well. But more pointedly on this, I certainly take the same interest you take. I struggle to understand what flexibility we have in the statute to actually change what will be negotiated even in a future contract, even with fair warning. So I'm not entirely clear. I think it's fine to state that. I mean, I share all of your concerns, just to be clear. But I wonder out loud if this is more a statutory problem than something we can actually fix ourselves in a next contract or adjudication, given what looks like a pretty restrictive statute as far as what our actual abilities are in these situations.
Well, I think we do have, I mean, this new transmission is coming up in unpredictable and really expensive ways that are not captured in the static marginal cost analysis. So, as the load and resource balances tighten, I think we have an option of defining marginal cost in a more dynamic way to make sure we're getting public interest outcomes when $2 to $3 billion of new transmission comes out of the blue because of loads in the Denver metro area. That uncertainty and that risk, just needs to be part of the dialogue. So I'll turn it back to you, Commissioner Plan. Anything you'd like to add on that discussion, or feel free to raise the issue you'd like.
No, I was going to agree with you. I also think that, you know, in addition to marginal costs, there's the ability to, you know, the cross subsidization determination, I think would also include some of those costs that you've identified.
Unless you have anything else to add, I'll go back to, was that the issue you wanted to add, Commissioner Plan, or do you have a separate one?
I have a separate one.
Unless you have something, Commissioner Gelman? Nope. Go ahead, Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, so the other issue that I wanted to add again has to do with, you know, a determination of marginalized costs and also the marginal costs and the cross subsidization. And, you know, I mean, as we said, this application has the benefit of coming first, but for future applications, it's likely that we may consider that a showing of a rate above marginal cost or the calculation of cross subsidization require the ability to demonstrate the flexibility of demand as they're bringing forward these projects. That's, as we've talked about in a couple of times already this morning, that's an increasingly important component of additional load on the system. And so that just as a heads up, that will likely be something that this commission may want to include as a consideration in future applications.
Well, I think that ties back to my comment, is that, you know, there has to be a more nuanced way of thinking about obligation to serve. You know, whether it's flexibility or, you know, thinking about curtailment, interruption, limiting. So I don't know if Commissioner Goldman, you want to add anything?
Well, I mean, maybe just the kind of obvious linkage here is this type of facility seems very likely to have pretty large scale backup power given the critical nature of the loads. I don't think there's a lot in this record or there, but it certainly makes sense to reason that exists. There's almost no discussion on it or debate about how you ensure this customer actually kind of services and acts in a way that benefits the grid, especially in terms of utilizing, you know, other assets that likely already exist to provide kind of demand response and flexibility services to the grid as I think as part of the situation of getting this discount and what that all looks like. So it seems to me a pretty obvious linkage that clearly should get some airtime in any future application.
Mr. Davis, does that give you enough to draft a decision on those two issues?
Well, I think I understand what the commission wants to say in terms of future. As far as the reason for denying the exceptions is the reason that the ALJ's analysis with respect to the company's presentation of the negotiated rate being above marginal cost. Is that what the decision should include for the reason for denying the exceptions?
Yes,
Okay.
I would accept that recommendation in the form of a question. So
okay, thank you. Okay, I'll move on. The UCA contends in its exceptions that the negotiated security fund in the contract is inadequate and asks the commission to establish additional guardrails. UCA specifically asks the commission to require a security fund amount that is substantially increased over the negotiated amount. Public Service responds that the ALJ was correct in concluding that the UCA's concerns were speculative and in finding that the company had thoroughly and reasonably conducted due diligence in establishing a significant security fund to mitigate risks and incorporate protections in the contracts to recoup consequences of contract default. Public Service argues that the UCA presented no evidence that would call those findings into question. The company goes on to explain that the TSA requires QTS to pay the full costs of the transmission facilities in advance of taking service, subject to true-up, and if QTS were to default in paying its bills after it begins to receive service, other customers would be fully protected by normal disconnection procedures. Furthermore, Public Service argues that the Commission does not have the power to rewrite contracts in the absence of directives or requirements in statute. I can answer questions, make a recommendation, or turn it over to you for a discussion on the security fund.
If you can make a recommendation, that'd be great.
Okay. We agree with ALJ that UCA failed to show the Commission must impose additional conditions beyond those in the negotiated contract to ensure that the Commission can protect non-EDR customers from cross-subsidization. First, we agree with the recommended decision that Public Service thoroughly and reasonably conducted due diligence in establishing the security fund. Second, the recommended decision applies the correct weight to the statement of Public Service's witness that non-EDR participants will bear no financial risks associated with the agreements. And in sum, the ALJ properly concludes that in the event of contingencies that are argued by UCA should ever occur, Public Service would have to attempt cost recovery in an appropriate proceeding, and such matters could be adequately resolved by the Commission in the future in pursuit of the Commission's ongoing obligation to prohibit cross-subsidization. So that, in other words, the ALJ properly concluded that if UCA's worries come to fruition, the Commission can address that in future rate cases.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
Also agree.
as do I.
And next, UCA argues that it's necessary for the Commission to direct Public Service to exclude those transmission facilities from the company's rate base. UCA argues that if the assets are included in rate base, even at zero cost, the company can include other costs associated with those facilities through base rates, such as operations and maintenance costs. In response, Public Service explains that after the EDR contract expires, QTS will be an ordinary industrial customer and must be treated like any other such customer in terms of rate setting. The company argues that the Commission should reject the proposal to specifically discriminate against QTS with respect to facilities which QTS will be paying for entirely upfront. Public Service further adds that because the company will own the facilities, they must be included in rate-based calculations as a matter of accounting. I can move to a recommendation if you like, or listen to your discussion.
Yeah, if you could give us a recommendation, that'd be great.
Advisors agree with Public Service that including the transmission facilities in rate base at zero value is the correct means for regulatory accounting. We further agree with Public Service that excluding the assets from rate base presents a problem since service under the contract is only for 10 years. And consistent with the recurring analysis in the recommended decision, the UCA has failed to show why its request is a necessary condition to prevent cross-subsidization. So we recommend that the UCA's exceptions on this point be denied.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
Yeah, I think I agree. So Mr. Davis, is your understanding of the situation that after 10 years, as you stated, QTS will begin taking service as a normal transmission level customer, and then these assets would stay in rate base still at a zero value?
Right. Right.
Okay.
The assets will have a zero value. So that what that means is the company will be earning no return on those assets as it made no investment in them.
Right. With regard to their concern about the O&M, is there any kind of discussion or elaboration on who's expected to pay the O&M on this dedicated line to ensure there is no cross-subsidization by other customers?
Well, the rates that are being paid by QTS will be covering those costs according to the company's analysis. So
the marginal cost calculation somehow had an adder for the specific O&M for their asset?
well, the showing was that over time, the company will receive revenues from QTS in excess of the cost to serve QTS. And
that
so,
will also exceed.
so those costs, right? If there are O&M costs incurred to use the line that is paid for by QTS, the revenues that the company will collect from QTS will more than satisfy those costs, and cross-subsidization will not occur from other customers.
Is this anything we expect to be broken out in future rate cases so we can actually tell?
Well, that was an issue that I think was raised by Climax in the case, and I think that was addressed by ALJ Adams in the recommended decision, and ALJ Adams declined to require a specific presentation of all of this, but I can confirm that if you'd like. I can come back when you take up other matters, and we could resume because I don't have an answer for that question fully right now.
Sorry, yeah, my interest, I mean, I'm still interested in it because to me, I mean, to project it is one thing, for it to actually happen, so you have no cross-subsidization is another, as I think we've seen some issues in terms of consistency of data and sticking to forecasts for expenses from the company that lead me to be concerned about if the forecast will actually come true.
I guess, Mr. Davis, do you have any concerns if we just ask for that presentation in the next rate case? I mean, it's just a filing request given Commissioner Gilman's concerns, which I share. Is there any reason we can't just ask for it?
Well, I would like to read the recommended decision because there's a specific section in that on requirements for a presentation in a rate case.
Okay, so if you don't have any concerns, why don't we assume that we will ask for it? But before we end today, if you can, once you've read it, let us know if you'd like to do something different. Would that work for you?
Yeah, I'll the way the recommended decision is organized, I will need some time. So
Okay.
If there is an issue, I will put my camera on before you move on to your final item on today's agenda.
Thank you.
Okay, so the final thing for these exceptions is that UCA requests that the commission enter findings and conclusions that the settlement agreement approved in 20A345E is that it has no prejudicial effect. UCA argues that the recommended decision lacks an affirmative ruling with regard to the previous settlement agreement and is asking that the commission affirm that all findings and conclusions on this particular application and the granted CPCN are all supported by the evidentiary record, and the approval of each is in the public interest. On this point, we agree with Public Service that it's unnecessary for the commission to render findings in this particular case regarding how the approved settlement agreement in the earlier case applies to QTS, because such findings are not required for the commission to decide the issues in this proceeding. But as you've already discussed this morning, the commission is going to include in this order that while Public Service applied the proper analysis to support this particular contract on the record here, in the future, just summarize what you've said, the company's systems and rates will continue to change over time, and that future non-standard EDR contracts could require the use of different measures of marginal cost. They could entail the inclusion or exclusions of different rate adjustments, and they could include additional terms and conditions, ones that were not necessary for QTS, but might be necessary in the future for EDR customers, such as the demand flexibility the Commissioner Plant describes, in order for the company to meet its burden of proof and for the commission to satisfy its statutory obligations under the statute.
That makes sense to me. Commissioner Plant?
Yep, I agree.
Commissioner Gilman?
I agree. I can't remember if that's the last issue, but I have one thing to bring up at the end.
Go ahead, Commissioner Gilman. I think that is the last issue.
Mr. Davis, I was wondering if you could elaborate for me with regard to kind of consistency of data and I guess telling the same story across different proceedings. Can you help me understand the comparison of what's been communicated as the cost of adding incremental capacity, especially incremental peak capacity in this proceeding versus say TEP proceeding or clean heat proceeding? You know, I've tried to do some checking and first of all, it's difficult comparison to make. Also, I think referencing the EDR tariff, the standard tariff that exists, you know, at least when I looked, I found 4 different stories about what the cost of incremental capacity at peak costs, which is in part spurring my continued concerns about the consistency of data and being able to track what we're being told here across future proceedings like the rate case. So maybe you can help me understand the comparisons in all of these proceedings that are honestly quite fresh at this point.
Right. Well, that's a great question, and I knew you were going to ask this question, so I did have the time to do a little research. And what's interesting here is that the generation long-term marginal cost that is set forth in the tariff is at $4.13 per kW month. And in other proceedings, you've been presented values of a generation capacity marginal cost that's significantly higher. And even in this proceeding, the company applied the marginal cost of generation that is shown or reflected in the phase 2 of the current ERP, and its marginal cost analysis was recalculated with a significantly higher value of capacity, something that's I think was closer to $13 based on the phase 2 results. In other proceedings, there have been presentations of different values. For instance, in the DSM, Beneficial Electrification Plan, I think the company presented a range that was in the $10 to $20 range. And this new value that was used to do the analysis for QTS is within that range. But again, that's a huge range from $4 on the tariff to that was the result of updates done in the last phase 2 rate case to $20 that's being argued as the cost of new generation in a different context. And so, yes, you're correct. There's this range of numbers, and they're not necessarily consistent, and they're being applied in ways that seem to be beneficial to the company's arguments. And it's difficult in that situation to know what is the best number to be using consistently across all cases.
Yeah,
Anything
thanks
else?
for addressing that. I mean, I had shared this concern, I think, in the clean heat proceeding, as I saw, you know, a kind of a different story being told about the cost of adding new capacity to serve electrification, you know, in that circumstance across TEP and the clean heat proceeding. But here we have a third and fourth, I think, version of what this cost is. And so probably just a topic of discussion, I think, as we continue in earnest and effort to ensure that the company is presenting consistent data for the same exact thing they are trying to communicate across proceedings. It's an issue we see here as well. And it sounds like an issue that is particularly pointed in the EDR tariff that's out right now that has a much, much lower value than we're seeing in any of the more recent proceedings being presented on the cost of that additional capacity. So I don't know that there's any specific decision point, but this seemed a very reasonable place to bring up this concern about just the difference in data we see across proceedings.
I'd like to include that, concern in the final order. Would that work for you, Commissioner Plant?
Yes.
Mr. Davis, is there any timing concern, or can we do this as a TBC?
Yes, we can certainly do this as a TBC.
All right. Anything else on this one, Mr. Davis?
No, and I'll let you know if I need to come back in case what the commission would like to include in the decision regarding a rate case presentation is a conflict with the recommended decision, and so I could just present it that way for the final decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Proceeding number 24AL-0049G, Public Service Company gas rate case. Ms. Friedman, Ms. Harper.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ellie Friedman again with your advisory staff. In a previous decision in this proceeding, the Commission stated that the process for the evidentiary hearing in the proceeding and the establishment of a public comment hearing would be established by separate decision. So today, I recommend that the Commission first set a remote public comment hearing for Thursday, July 25th, 2024, from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock p.m. And I also recommend that based on Commissioner availability, that you confirm the evidentiary hearing scheduled for September 4 through 6 and 10 through 12 will be fully remote and will follow the Commission's established procedures for remote hearings.
Commissioner Plant?
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman?
Can you get me that public comment hearing date one more time?
July 25th, it's a Thursday from 4 to 6 p.m.
Okay, and then I know these aren't on our calendar yet, so we'll probably want to do that really soon. And then the hearing is September.
There's two options. If there's a no settlement, that it would be September 4th through the 6th and the 10th through the 12th. If there is a settlement, then it would just be September 10th through the 12th.
Okay.
And that would be remote.
If you could get those days on our calendar sooner rather than later.
We will do that immediately after this meeting.
Thank you. And that can be an ABC decision.
Thank you.
24A-0156G, Public Service Gas DSM bonus. Mr. Lamar.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Patrick Lemaire with your Economics and Financial Analysis section. Today, I'm here to present the application filed by Public Service Company of Colorado regarding its 2023 Gas Demand Side Management DSM bonus, filed on April 1st, 2024, proceeding number 24A-0156G. The company seeks approval of the DSM bonus, which includes the acknowledgement of lost revenues, otherwise known as ALR, as reflected in the company's gas DSM cost adjustment, also known as the DSMCA-D. No party has filed intervention in this case. The application requests approval for a bonus calculated based on the net economic benefits achieved for the gas DSM measures implemented in the year 2023 for both residential and non-residential customer classes. The company's filing aligns with rules 4752C and 4760, the rules that mandate the utilities must include in their annual filings the bonus amount and its calculations. The application also involves an adjustment of the DSMCA-G rates proposed to take effect on July 1st, 2024. The Commission has previously approved the 2023 gas DSM program budget and plan and decision number C230381. This application builds on the foundation and details significant outcomes from 2023, where Public Service recorded DSM expenditures of approximately $23.6 million. This investment yielded savings of 914,655 decatherms, achieving 110% of the annual goal, and delivered net economic benefits of $34.1 million. This performance supports a calculated financial incentive totaling $7.9 million for the gas portfolio, which includes both the DSM bonus and the reference ALR. The calculations for these amounts, which are capped by Rule 4760G, at the lesser of 25% of expenditures or 20% of net benefits, are detailed in the company's 2023 Colorado DSM status report. Additionally, the company has provided evaluation, measurement, and verification, or EM&V protocols, which verify the savings and technical assumptions cited in this application. I will pause here to address any questions you might have or provide any additional details, or I can just move on to staff's recommendation.
If you could give a recommendation, that'd be great.
Sure. Staff finds the application and associated calculations are accurate and compliant with the established guidelines. Therefore, staff recommends that the Commission approve public services application in this proceeding.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
Also agree.
as do I, and that can be in ABC order, deeming the application complete and granting it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Keep your camera on, sir.
Yeah.
Proceeding number 24A-0171E, Tri-State Certificate for Public Necessity and Convenience.
Yeah, thank you. Still Patrick Lemaire here, and with me is staff engineer Bill Dalton, who will also be available if you have any questions. I'm here to present Tri-State Generation and Transmission Association Incorporated's application for a Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, or CPCN, for the Crosspoint Delivery Point Substation Project, listed under this proceeding on today's agenda. This application also requests specific findings regarding the magnetic fields and audible noise associated with the project. No parties have intervened in this proceeding. On April 8th, 2024, Tri-State filed an application requesting the Commission issue a CPCN for this crucial infrastructure project, aimed at addressing the significant load growth and enhancing reliability of the electrical system in El Paso County. The project includes construction of a new 230 69 kilovolt substation that will substantially increase load serving capability and reliability, and will serve as an interconnection point for the 69 kilovolt systems owned by Mountain View Electric Association and Southeast Colorado Power Association. Furthermore, the proposed substation is designed to enhance the existing Lincoln Midway 230 kilovolt transmission line. As required, Tri-State evaluated various alternatives before settling on this proposal. They considered adding new generation, implementing non-wires alternatives, and upgrading existing transmission facilities before determining that the Crosspoint solution was the most efficient and cost-effective option. The total estimated cost for constructing the Crosspoint substation project is approximately $15.6 million. Turning our focus to the compliance aspects, staff found that the project fully meets the requirements set forth by Rules 3102 and 3206 regarding the magnetic fields and noise levels. Specifically, the magnetic field levels at the substation fence are confirmed to be less than 20.9 milligauss, or mg, ensuring safety and compliance with regulatory standards. When it comes to audible noise, the analysis performed by the company's independent engineer concludes that the noise levels are entirely reasonable and within the accessible limits, and staff agrees. Lastly, the company has confirmed that they have received all necessary local, state, and federal permits required for construction of the Crosspoint Delivery Point substation. I will pause here to address any questions you might have, or answer any questions, or provide details either me or engineer Bill Dalton can provide, or I can just move on to staff's recommendation.
Yeah, if you could share staff's recommendation, that'd be great.
Sure. So staff finds that based on our review and the analysis presented, it's clear that the Crosspoint Delivery Point substation is essential for meeting both current and future electric needs for the region, is well planned, necessary, and in the public interest. Therefore, staff recommends that the Commission approve the CPCN for Tri-State's project, and furthermore, staff recommends that the Commission note in its order that the project adheres to all statutory requirements concerning audible noise and magnetic field levels.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
I also agree.
as do I, and that could be an ABC decision deeming the application complete and granting it. Anything else, Mr. Lemaire?
Nope, that's all I need. Thank you very much.
Thanks to both of you. Proceeding number 24M-0173E, Mr. Gomez, Mr. Davis, Excel's Public Service Power Shutoffs.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. By decision number C24-0232, mailed April 15th, 2024, the Commission opened this docket proceeding to gain a better understanding of Public Service's proactive wildfire mitigation actions that were deployed on April 6th to 7th of 2024 of its electrical transmission and distribution systems, including public safety power shutoffs. Also in that decision, you ordered Public Service to provide responses to a series of questions regarding the company's operational actions and decision-making, customer communications activities, and community engagement efforts. The Commission received numerous written comments and live comments at the April 17th public comment hearing that was established by that decision. Members of the public provided detailed anecdotes of what they experienced during the outage. The Commission subsequently scheduled a Commissioners' informational meeting for May 6, 2024 by decision C24-0256 to discuss with the company its actions and responses to the questions you posed in that decision. You wanted to hear responses from the company regarding how Public Service made decisions on where and when the public safety power shutoffs were initiated, including an explanation of any wildfire modeling, the frequency, timing, and methods of communications to customers, the process of restoration of service, and Public Service's response to the oral and written public comments the Commission received. After hearing from the company, you then convened a panel of city and county managers and emergency personnel to gather information from their experiences with the PSPS of April 6th to 8th and their suggestions for going forward in future events. Public Service, through its president, Robert Kenny, and Michael Lamb, Senior Vice President of Distribution and Gas Operations, discussed the key event takeaways from the high wind event and outage. Also discussed was an overview of the wind event, the operational mitigations the company utilized for high wind risk, the criteria for enabling wildfire safety operations, or WSO, and wildfire safety settings, or WSS, and the public safety power shutoffs, or PSPS. The company further explained the criteria for enabling WSO, including the use of wildfire safety settings I'm sorry, hang on just a second. And the criteria for, additionally, they explained the use of its TechnoSilva software used to model PSPS and risk analysis. The company offered explanations of why some neighborhoods were impacted partially with some residents experiencing outages while neighbors retained power, as well as neighborhoods impacted by PSPS and those neighborhoods with undergrounding that were nonetheless subject to PSPS. Finally, the company discussed its communications with customers during the high wind event and the restoration of power upon the event's conclusion. Public Service discussed its need to improve, including commitments to improve communication, publish maps of areas affected by outages, and support line workers to restore power as soon as possible. The company also set out a plan for an improved PSPS communications that includes earlier and more frequent communications. The second part of the CIM was dialogue with the Boulder Director of Office of Disaster Management, Jefferson County Manager of Emergency Management, Larimer County Director of Emergency Management, and the CEO of Downtown Boulder Partnership. Each of these participants provided anecdotal information, as well as firsthand accounts of the consequences of the outage, including a lack of communication or advance notice by the company. They also discussed from their perspectives how the company should improve its communication and advance notice protocols with local governments to ensure transparency as early in an outage process as possible. The information you received from public comments, both written and at the public comment hearing, was invaluable and informed the Commission of the consequences of an outage situation accompanied by inadequate communication and cooperation from Public Service. This was buttressed by the information received by local government emergency management leaders as to how the company could work better with local emergency management offices and first responders to ensure transparency and timely continuous communications with the public. This was especially important for those members of the public reliant on home medical equipment to be able to make alternative arrangements in anticipation of a weather-related outage event. So, given the decision C24-0232 and the questions that you had propounded to the company as part of that, the information received through public comments at the public comment hearing and at the commissioners' information meeting have answered the questions that you sought from the company and the information that you sought from the public. Therefore, it appears that the accomplishments that you have accomplished the objectives of decision number C24-0232. Therefore, I would recommend that you close this end proceeding as there's nothing further to do within this particular proceeding as set forth in decision number C24-0232.
I have some comments I'd like to share, and a request to include some thoughts in the order. For me, this investigation is one component of a larger fact-based, data-driven set of efforts by the PUC to better understand what happened regarding the planned outage, the key lessons to be learned, and how to start placing the company and Colorado on a path to best national practice in affordably protecting public safety. As part of the transition to the next stage of the process, I'd like to identify 8 areas among potentially others expressed in the form of questions to include in the order closing this document, to summarize some of the key points we heard, and to help inform the utility and other stakeholders going forward. The first question is, can a list of business association, chambers of commerce, emergency operations centers, and downtown partnerships be developed that have been or are likely to be adversely impacted or can help us spread the message in high wind areas? Second, can detailed maps be created and updated defining high wind and likely outage areas prior to and during weather events? Third, should there be regular meetings between utility personnel and state emergency operations to discuss how, who, and under what circumstances utilities would embed people in the center during an event? Fourth, can a list be developed of critical local facilities and infrastructure customers, hospitals, sewage treatment plants, along with information on backup power capacity, batteries, generators at each facility? Can a similar list be created for residential customers with critical needs and potential availability backup options? Is there more that the regulated system could do through rebates or other mechanisms to facilitate backup power? Fifth, should power outage coordination meetings be held among adjacent utilities in high wind areas? Six, should local governments within high wind areas be provided with a single point of contact at the utility during outage events? Seventh, are there sensors or other technological approaches that could help to restore power more quickly without a visual inspection of every individual line after a planned power shutoff or other outages? Eighth, how can utilities communicate more effectively with core stakeholders, including customers, emergency management, and community leaders about upcoming events, duration of outages, and restoration timing to help mitigate adverse impacts? For me, these are some of the core questions that need to be answered by the utilities and other stakeholders as we transition to the next phase of the process. So I'll stop there. See if you have any thoughts on those items, Commissioner Plant, or anything you'd like to add to the discussion.
Yeah, I appreciate it. That's a great list and a great summary of, sort of what came out of our conversations. I would just say, to those who are following this, this is obviously a very important issue for the commission. It's going to be a component in the upcoming wildfire mitigation plan that's going to be submitted by the company. And I want to just assure those who submitted their comments, and I think we received over 700 public comments within this proceeding, that those will all be considered as we go forward and discuss this future plan. And so we appreciate the input of people sharing their experiences and also their suggestions of how we can make this better. I think there was an acknowledgement, generally, that this is sort of the new normal, maybe, that we're seeing increased events like this and also heightened wildfire risk. And it hits so many different aspects of people's lives. And there was just a report in the New York Times, I think a day or two ago, about trends with insurance going up in certain areas. Colorado's one of those areas, and we were one of the states that was highlighted as having higher costs than income, for insurance companies, and that doesn't bode well for anybody because it makes it harder to get insurance. If you can't get insurance, it's really hard to either buy or sell a house. And I think, certainly the people who live in the wildland urban interface in Colorado are already experiencing this. I know that certainly in Nederland, this has been the reality for the last maybe 5-6 years. So, I think that, we have we're one component of trying to get our arms around this changing reality. And I just wanted to express my appreciation to all the people who sent in their comments, and we'll try and do what we can in this next mitigation plan.
I'd also echo your appreciation and just say I learned a ton, and hopefully the questions that have been raised can guide things over the time period before there's a final order in the whatever litigated process follows. So Commissioner Gilman, comments, thoughts?
Yeah, I'll certainly tag on the appreciation for all those who submitted either written comments or showed up at our public comment hearing. I found the comments to be really constructive and informative to kind of framing my understanding of not just the technical aspects of what went on, but what were the communications, what were the process, what was the experience of customers during this event. So that was incredibly helpful. I have a few kind of comments and notes too. So I was just wondering, with your questions, Chairman, what's your vision of what happens to those questions? I mean, we're closing the proceedings, so they don't get answered here. They're like somewhat rhetorical in terms of framing up our.
Well, I guess I'm just and I'll ask Mr. Gomez to weigh in a second, but I'm careful about prejudging whatever application gets filed. So the thought was that the commission would put these decisions, these questions in an order that the parties could use as they see fit, both during, the interim time period before a final decision enters in the application. And to the extent the parties want to use them however they'd like to, they can, because it's an expression of commission interest. But at the same time, trying to be cautious about prejudging a case that could be before us in the next 30 days. So I think we're walking a little bit of a tight line here, and I'm watching your body language, Mr. Gomez. So you want to help us keep us on the right side of the line?
Yeah, well, I would just probably advise that there's going to be a closely related proceeding filed soon that will give you the opportunity to delve deeper into these issues in a full adjudicatory capacity and give you the opportunity to look into these issues deeper, to receive evidence and testimony and hear from experts in the field that will shape your decisions and what you finally decide. So because of that, and because of the close proximity of that proceeding to this, I would advise that yes, that I believe your questions are general enough and are not directly ordering anyone to respond to those as part of this proceeding or any other proceeding. So, but just to use those, as you say, as maybe something that spurs thoughts or conversation and that's fine. But I think that given, again, the close proximity of this proceeding to another proceeding that will be filed shortly, that that's probably the best way to proceed right now.
So it's it's identifying areas of interest to help guide, the interim period before there's a binding order based on record evidence that really, shapes this. So yeah, I think if you'd like to raise your two issues or more issues, wherever you'd like to go, Commissioner Gilman.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of them relate to the questions you asked and kind of my instinct that it's possible we see a wildfire, we will see a wildfire plan come in. Wildfire mitigation plan, I guess I should say. But I think, part of my concern is it might be a very capital heavy plan, and I'm concerned how much interest the communications and processes get in it.
Yeah, commissioners, I think that probably now you're getting a little too far into the adjudicatory portion of this, and so I would advise that maybe you stick to the comments with regard to the informational meeting rather than getting into the a proceeding that has not been filed yet.
Okay, the comments highlighted some serious communications and process concerns, and I certainly hope most of those are addressed by the company in the near future.
I would strongly echo that comment. however they're going to be addressed. Anything else you'd like to add?
I didn't follow your questions like precisely enough as you rattled them off, so maybe we can see those in writing before they go out and see how they relate. But I think it's yeah, I'll have to take it up when the proceeding starts to make sure all of the issues of our interest are addressed. I wish they could hear them here today, but it doesn't sound like they can. So might be a surprise for them in the next proceeding.
I think with that, Mr. Gomez, I think we're going to want to do this as a TBC order. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's
anything else for this one?
no, that's it.
All right. If you guys are all right with it, why don't we take a 10-minute break till 11:10 and then come back with proceeding number 23A-0392 EG, the Public Service Company of Colorado Clean Heat Pan. So 11:10. All right, Mr. Mendelson, take us home.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Mike Mendelson of your advisory staff. I'm joined by Lindsay Dundas of Commission Council. Today's the fifth deliberation of Public Services Clean Heat Plan. In the first deliberation, the Commission agreed, among other things, to go above the cost cap, reject the company's scalar mechanism, reject the company's constraint on AC replacements alone, and approve the company's use of the CEO roadmap as a reasonable basis for the expected BE adoption trend line. At the beginning of hearings, recognizing the possibility of those decisions, the Commission required the company to conduct a model run with those characteristics in place. The company returned with its analysis marked as Hearing Exhibit HE 145, Attachment DRA 16, which indicated that with no constraint on AC replacements on their own, the E3 model selected greater use of heat pumps, representing a cost-effective adoption slightly above the CEO roadmap. The model run also resulted in a modest increase in investment over the flex-based plan, but also that the company would be on an early path to achieve the 2030 emission reduction targets, and that without the scalar and constraint on AC replacements, the cost benefits increase significantly. When discussing this option for potential approval, Chair Blank raised several concerns regarding long-term rate impacts. Commissioner Plant offered his own budget, which eliminated half of 2024, representing the inevitable timing of your decision here. He also flattened the budget and allowed for full year-to-year budget flexibility, suggesting actual adoptions will be uncertain and the company will need more flexibility to accommodate for such over the CHP period. Commissioner Gilman also offered her own adjustments to the bench request results and responded to Commissioner Plant's proposal that the budget should follow the general expectation of BE adoption consistent with the CEO roadmap. Also worth noting, at the last deliberation, the Commission heard staff's proposal to cut short the CHP approval period to 2026 and relitigate both that and the strategic issues filing next summer when the company's SI application is due. The Commission rejected that specific proposal, but did generally agree with the notion that in order to efficiently adjudicate the numerous proceedings expected over the next several years, some aggregation of applications will be necessary, and doing so will likely lead to a better and more efficient outcome. So with that background, advisors went back to the drawing board and developed a proposed CHP budget and regulatory pathway we believe accomplishes the array of goals you've established while meeting numerous constraints placed upon us by statute and other guardrails. I'll present the budget concept first. Advisors recommend the Commission adopt a budget that starts with the bench request result, as seen in the tab entitled Flex Base AC Replacement No Incentive of the hearing exhibit mentioned, but modified in the following manner. One, that the 2024 budget and associated accomplishments would be cut in half to recognize only 6 months at best of implementation are likely left in the year. Two, that 2028 will be removed entirely from the period approved in this current CHP. This will require a somewhat earlier second CHP application and removes the necessity of the flex plan check-in process in 2026. Three, the modified bench request also removes hydrogen resources and reduced recovered methane to $10 million over the 25 to 26 period per the Commission's decisions in those areas. And four, to accommodate uncertainty in adoption levels and the potential need for additional financial resources in a given year, the modified bench request incorporates a traditional flexibility option for a resource investment in a given year and between resources in a given year. Here, advisors recommend a 15% flexibility option pursuant to a 60-90-day process and to include a requirement that adoption levels should increase commensurately with expanded budget, where the company should explain why such is not attainable. With respect to the flexibility between resources, advisors would recommend the 15% limit of such based on the size of the smaller program, which would experience a shift in funds. Overall, the modified bench request would provide $440 million in financial resources over 3.5 years of implementation, including the flex mechanism as described. We note that the annual budgets through 2026 alone embedded in this modified bench request represent a 76% increase over the DSM budget approved just last year in the Strategic Issues Proceeding, number 22A0309EG, and a 213% increase over the electrification budget supported in that SI decision. And that it should scale savings consistently or even higher than the savings levels approved in the SI docket. The SI funding, as you should know, terminates in 2026, but could be extended through one or more pathway options discussed below. I'll also note that the modified bench request is projected to produce roughly 725,000 MMT of CO2 equivalent emission abatement by 2027. I say roughly because the emission reduction value of recovered methane, if spread over several years as required in the Commission's decision, represents an unknown quantity of emission reduction. Also, the company did not include market transformation portfolio emission reduction capabilities in its calculation of projected abatement, and the Commission voted to support the whole neighborhood electrification program at up to 6x the company's projected level. Accordingly, the net emission reduction value is uncertain at this time, although we have a decent ballpark of that number. To put it in context, the modified bench request is projected to produce about 1/3 of the 2030 emission reduction target by 2027, but is generally consistent with the unmodified bench request, which, as mentioned earlier in the deliberations, does offer a potential pathway to meeting the 2030 target levels. At this juncture, I'd like to ask if you would prefer that I describe the regulatory pathway options that the advisors developed for you, or if you would like to discuss the budget issues first.
I'd like to talk about the regulatory pathways because I think it's fairly critically integrated with the budget proposal.
Okay, let's just take a couple minutes. Okay, so first, with respect to the regulatory pathway, advisors would like to note that in the 2024 to 26 plan proceeding that's currently being adjudicated as 23A059EG, that case represents the program implementation for funds approved under both the SI and this CHP funding facilities. So per your decision in the funding, this one set of programs will have significant new financial resources to work with, as well as extensive new goals to design toward. On Monday, ALJ Merbaba read into the 0589 record the Commission guidance verbally agreed to last week in this case for stakeholder engagement on budget alignment. Judge Merbaba noted the complexity of the interacting cases, the sheer volume and technical nature of the record in that case, and put the parties on notice she may have to seek additional delay in producing an order. The hearings were put on hold this week, and the parties were encouraged to find opportunities for settlement and report back on their progress on Friday morning. With that background, note that there are numerous interacting proceeding types facing public service gas planning over the next several years, including CHP, SI, Plan, GIP, and any M docket proceedings the Commission initiated here are generally applicable to gas planning and initiated elsewhere. Notably also, the statute requires SI proceedings every 4 years. That was beginning in 2022, and the next one is expected in summer 2025. And separately, BE plan proceedings every 3 years. The next SI proceeding is expected to produce the long-anticipated potential study that will hopefully inform CHP and other dockets once approved. And the duration of the budget approved in the CHP will determine the need for how soon the next CHP needs to be submitted. If the Commission stays the course of current proceedings, the array of proceedings would include the current plan proceeding, which the Commission is likely to see on exceptions, numerous M dockets that are contemplated in your decision thus far. Those include whether and how to align the inducement or incentive the company receives to implement its programs. I'll note that there is currently designed to get a PIM through SI investment and amortization and WAC through this decision. SEAMS issues, as well as the AQCC SIM that was raised, and potential cost effectiveness test alignment. An on-bill financing application due in November, the next GIP filing due May 2025, the next SI application, as I mentioned, July 25, the CHP check-in process, which is due August 2026, the next DSM plan proceeding due December 2026, the following GIP proceeding to May 2027, and finally the next CHP application to August 2027. And this excludes rate cases, rider updates, CPCNs, and other dockets that may come in the door. In order to create a more efficient pathway, advisors developed an analysis of your options here and shared that with each of you. Option 1 is to stay the course. Option 2 would combine the next CHP and SI proceedings in mid-2026. As mentioned, by statute, the next SI has to occur by then, by July 2026. This option would eliminate the 2025 SI proceeding and would generally allow CHP to be the overall funding evaluation process, thereby eliminating the confusing distinction between SI and CHP investments. Option 3 would keep the current SI as planned in mid-2025 and require the next CHP by January 2027 for a 28 implementation. Maintaining the 2025 SI would allow review and finalization of the potential study as a foundational document to other decision making. It also could act as a forum to evaluate some of the M-docket issues raised here, including harmonizing the company's inducement mechanism. It also would allow for more experience and data collection in program implementation upon which to inform refinement of the next CHP, which will cover 2030 emission targets directly. Advisors have listed pros and cons of each approach and believe no option is soundly better than another. We note that GIP and CHP processes are just getting underway, so it may be difficult to fully envision the benefits or complexities of proceeding aggregation at this juncture. We also note that the Commission may find some level of proceeding aggregation appropriate now, with potentially more to come as the Commission evaluates its alternatives in the next 1 to 2 years. So I'll pause there for your discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mendelson, for your leadership analysis and everything you've done on this case. Really greatly appreciated. I guess for me, I'd probably support advisor's budget and would adopt option 2 that combines the DSM SI case and the next clean heat plan, and at least cut down by 1 the number of adjudications. Ultimately, I'd like to be able to comprehensively evaluate demand forecasting, capital spending, long-term rate impacts, emissions, and BEDSM programs to reduce capital and spending and emissions in a single holistic process with all the pieces on the table at the same time. But I think for now, we probably need a separate GIP. So that's where I'm landing. Really curious to hear what you guys are thinking. Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I also appreciate the work you guys put into coming up with a sort of a pathway forward. You know, I think it makes sense as we're trying to align these. In my mind, kind of where we are is the DSM plan is going through 26, CHP plan going through 28, and if we shave a year off of one and maybe add a year onto the other.
One less adjudication.
Meet in the middle. And somehow bring these two things together. So I think that makes a lot of sense. You know, I think one of the things that I was thinking about as when we, you know, sort of got rid of, if we look at getting rid of 28 and, you know, moving away from the flex budget, you know, I started to go back to, okay, what were the budgets before the flex because, you know, once the flex was introduced, that sort of changed all of the proposals that we got coming forward. So I went back and looked at, you know, the different budgets before flex to see where we would be if, you know, we chopped off 28 and didn't have that check-in period. And, you know, there were kind of two approaches. One was the public service approach of, you know, calculating out a budget and then developing the programs. And, you know, as I said, I think to me, it feels like it should be the other way around, that you develop the programs and then determine what the budget to accomplish that goal would be.
What a concept, right?
You know, the two approaches were PSCO, which started with the budget, and the PFB that started with the programs and ended up with the budget. And so I liked the PFB approach better, and so I took those numbers from Mr. Brandt's testimony, I think it was, which had the DSM and the BE numbers. I chopped off 28. I took out our decisions that we already made and took them out of the budgeted numbers relatively to his numbers, and I came up with basically a budget that was based on the PFB. And the end result of that was $506 million through 27. I also cut the 24 in half. And, you know, that to me sort of follows, you know, the analysis that the PFB did in terms of adoption. I can go into some of the different, you know, discussions that I think the companies brought up in their concerns with the PFB, which I think I have some disagreements with. But bottom line is, what I realized at the end of the day in looking at the advisor's budget is that they have an additional 15%. And that's kind of the difference between the PFB budget and the advisor's budget, was about 15%. 441 versus 506, I think it comes out to. So I think 15% increase into the advisor's budget ended up at 507. You know, at the end of the day, I feel pretty comfortable going forward with the advisor suggested budget. I will say I do like the way the PFB came at the development of their budget by starting with, you know, what are the incentives, what are the levels of adoption, what are the other incentives that are out there, what are the existing policies that are out there, and, you know, trying to arrive at a budget that way. I think that makes a lot more sense. But, you know, I could go either with this modified PFB budget out to 27, or with the advisor's recommended budget. So that's where I am.
And are you okay with, it sounds like you are okay with the regulatory pathway schedule?
Yeah, the regulatory pathway I think makes a lot of sense. I think, you know, there's going to be a number of different discussions that I think we have to have, you know, maybe outside of this proceeding with respect to how those go forward, how we address 2027, because that's sort of the gap year. And, you know, and then again, you know, how we kind of get the SI process, you know, in looking at the statute, it kind of instructs us to start with a budget and then implement programs, but maybe how we can take that as a starting point and then kind of work the other way as we combine the two, I think would be a really beneficial process.
So I think maybe depending on where you come out, Commissioner Gilman, we're sort of maybe on the advisor budget with some language in the order endorsing the PFB approach to budgeting and encouraging that going forward. But before I turn it over to Commissioner Gilman, do you need to jump in, Ms. Dundas?
If you wouldn't mind, Chair.
Go.
Just quickly just for clarity of the discussion for the public, I know we're using advisor budget as shorthand, but just to reiterate what Mr. Mendelson said in the beginning, this is the bench request modeling run from the company. So this is found in the record, just modified as a result of your decisions over the last 4 proceedings. So it's not a new concept from the advisors. It's that 145 DRA attachment, 16 flex base AC replacement, no incentive scalar. And then taking out the supply side resources as a result of your decisions, and then perhaps cutting 2028, as it looks like this is where that discussion's going. And then to Commissioner Plant's discussion of the PFB, since it sounds like it perhaps comes out to about the same place as what I'll now call the shorthand the advisor's budget, there's always also the option of writing a concurrent saying that there's other reasons to get to the place where we got. So just putting that out there for your consideration.
Or that could be part of our decision. But Commissioner Gilman, wherever you'd like to go.
Thanks for that, Ms. Dundas. Yeah, I guess starting with kind of the procedural pathways, to me, I think that's the foundational question. Are we lopping off 2028 or not? You kind of have to know that. And, you know, each of the options, I kind of map these out too. And it's a ton of proceedings, no matter what. And each of the options has some pros and cons, you know. So to me, in evaluating this, it came down to what is, I think, the primary goal that I would have. And to me, overriding the other kind of pros and cons of each approach is, I think my top priority is to align the DSM, BESI, and the Clean Heat Plan. You know, the more we got into this, the more the daylight between them narrowed quite a bit. Of course, the Clean Heat Plan has the ability to include supply side resources and takes really a wider view. But in that regard, you know, it's hard to say what you're setting SI goals on in DSM and BE anymore if it's not part of the Clean Heat Plan. At this point, the use of those resources is very largely used to drive reductions in greenhouse gas of the natural gas LDC systems. And so it would be, you know, the more I've gone through this proceeding, the more odd it feels to be like somewhat arbitrarily setting these budgets in some other proceeding, having a different incentive structure, having this convoluted approach where potentially the company is like cherry picking or deciding what programs or what things run under these different umbrellas, which in essence are not different at the end of the day in what they're doing and what they're accomplishing. So for me, you know, that's my top priority. So I agree with both of you in terms of pursuing a 2026 combined CHP and DSM BESI filing. Yeah, the biggest downside is I feel like we were so close to the promised land of getting the plan filings to be in the right cadence with the SI filing, only to snatch it back. But to me, that's worth it. That's a temporary problem. You know, we'll get them aligned again. I think we'll have to deal with 2027, but we'll get them aligned again. To me, the bigger prize here is I'm convinced these two really should be combined going forward. And so I think this provides us a good avenue to do that, as well as, you know, maybe not quite as long of data as we would like to see in this first one operating, but a really good timing for a course correction that's quite similar to what we were talking about for the flex anyway, to be able to really take a new look and reevaluate. Also, one of my priorities for that proceeding would be to really set an overall, this is gonna be a flashback to earlier this morning, but to set an overall incentive structure for greenhouse gas reductions and cost-effective greenhouse gas reductions on the system. If we keep ping-ponging these back and forth between SI and the clean heat, you end up with this bonus in DSM SI, which may be given even if the company does not achieve their DSM under clean heat, right? Like it just sets up this structure where we never get to a place where we actually have the big picture and can set an incentive structure that is based around kind of the big picture performance, we're always in this piecemeal catching up mode, which I'm interested in getting out of. So wholeheartedly endorse the idea of going to the 2026 combined filing. And we'll deal with 2027. With regard to the budget, I'm supportive of using the budget that's based in the flex space with the 2 adjustments that the commission ordered in the bench request. Realistically, I'm okay with cutting the 2024 values in half, realizing by the time things get up and running, there's not a huge amount of 2024 left. And given the decision on that combined filing, lopping 2028 off and reconsidering that is very reasonable there. I'm okay with the flexibility, especially considering we don't know what we don't know. I would kind of reiterate, I think, what I heard from Mr. Mendelson, and maybe a point that was made last week is to the extent the company exercises the upward flexibility in the budget, I would expect there to be somewhat commensurate savings or ambitions associated with that. The only other thing I wanted to address is I think it will be important in our decision and in our discussions to also identify the actual environmental goals, not just the budget goals. I mean, to me, the goal is not to spend this much money. The goal is to get the environmental outcomes, and you are permitted to spend up to this amount of money to do it. And I think we need to express those. It's a little wonky, especially with the recovered methane, especially if that investment is over a number of years rather than just like in the point year that we identified it in, 25 and 26. But even with that aside, you know, I'd like to see us expressing these goals in both decatherm saved as well as annual incremental carbon abatement. And I have some proposed values, which really came from the modeling run, just with these adjustments that we've talked about, the same adjustments that were made to the budget, halving 2024, and reducing the supply side resources as per our decisions. So I would strongly recommend that we include those in the decision to accompany the budget, as those are actually the goals.
I think I support everything Commissioner Gilman said. I have one more issue for you guys, but any comments on what Commissioner Gilman said, Commissioner Plant, before I raise my last issue?
Yeah, no, I agree with the points made by Commissioner Gilman. I did want to have some clarification because we've talked about the incentive structures in a variety. We've talked about it in 2 different proceedings this morning. They've come up in other proceedings. I think we talked about, I don't know if we talked about an M docket earlier and now sort of putting it into the 26 proceeding. I mean, personally, I think it would be better to start the conversation prior to a 26 proceeding, but I don't know what you were thinking about, Commissioner Gilman, in terms of trying to get our hands around all that stuff.
Well, I think there's a bunch of SEAMS issues, so I think we're going to still need the M docket. I think Mr. Mendelson's going to frame up a discussion on the M docket.
Okay.
Is that right, Mr. Mendelson?
I
You think you haven't? But so I guess we've already had a full discussion on the M docket. We were opening an M docket, and nothing we're doing as part of selecting option 2 changes that. Is that fair?
I would suggest that we start with the SIM that Commissioner Plant suggested, where we could talk to AQCC, because he brought up this broader concept of some entity being able to organize across regulated and non-regulated entities. And I think that would help frame up, the SEAMS issues a little bit better. But I see them as serving the same purpose, but I would suggest starting with the SIM, and then we can perhaps develop the M docket a little more clearly at that point.
Commissioner Gilman?
Yeah, I do want to go through the proceedings that come out of this just one more time, just so we're clear on like the themes and what other M dockets. But with regard to the incentive structure, I anticipate that's part of the 2026 combined filing, right? Like that's where you really make it. I think a stakeholder process before that tries to make ground would be good. I mean, hey, I don't want to go back to
evidence
this
in the
morning,
contract about that working.
but there's a chance we end up 2 years down the road, maybe 2 years down the road and still don't have the PIM we're asking for. So a stakeholder process before that combined filing could be a good idea to try to make up ground in terms of hopefully having a proposal that is more acceptable going in to many of the parties. So that would be an idea to kind of grease the wheels for that 2026 filing, but my guess is it actually would get taken up and set in the 2026 filing. That's just my instinct on how we deal with that, especially because we have a DSM bonus structure that's in place until then. So you're kind of caught in this halfway incentive already until that gets reevaluated. So that was just my thought, but I do want to go through the whole arrangement of proceedings and alignment that'll happen after this whenever.
You're so much more optimistic than I am. I mean, I've only been on the commission for a year, and I've heard you ask for this in the rate case, in the DSM case, and now you're going to ask for it in the next CHP. So, I mean, if you're optimistic that that's going to happen in the next CHP, I mean, I would support us trying to, do some sort of an organized approach at fleshing out these issues. But I'll leave it to you because you've been working on this longer than I have.
I appreciate your evolving cynicism, Commissioner Plans.
I would like to mention a couple of points. First of all,
Commissioner Plans cynicism or another?
But Commissioner Plant mentions that the budget and including flexibility would be close to the to what was proposed in the PFP report, but actually the $440 million figure that I represented earlier, which lops off 28 and half of 24, that includes the 15% flexibility concept that I proposed, the advisors proposed, in addition to the bench request DSM on electrification and the commission's decisions on the market transformation portfolio.
So it would be basically with the 15% flex, it would be about 15% below the modified PFB that I worked out.
Right.
I don't know if we have very specific numbers for the PFB proposal, and I would also note that the company raised some concerns with the PFB that it included additional dollars coming through the SI process that, was not to be, was not really evaluated here.
Yeah, I think I was trying to find in searching through Ms. Fickling's testimony and some others' testimony and Mr. Brandt's testimony. And the PFB itself, I was trying to find the actual breakout of the numbers by year for the CHP, and it was difficult, but I found one table in Mr. Brandt's answer testimony, which is what I based it on. I would say that those numbers that were in his testimony didn't align with the text of the actual PFB so it was a little bit hard to come up with exact numbers, and that's why I'm kind of, I'm sort of, if we don't hit it exactly, it's fine.
Well, it sounds like there's general agreement, Mr. Mendelson, that we're going to move forward with the budget you presented and listening to that last conversation, I think we're going to have evidentiary problems, perhaps doing anything else. So I think I think we may be set on the budget.
Okay. And at one point I'd like to make on the procedural pathway, if the commission does vote to delay the SI proceeding in 25, it's expected. I guess it would be important to distinguish between whether we're talking about the gas company's programs or budget versus the electric company, and whether both operating companies would be delayed, or if the electric company's SI would still be expected in 2025.
Could we go forward with just the 2025 DSM plan pending the later combined SI?
I believe you could, but I realized that I did not bring that up in some of the deliverables you've received recently. So that is a consideration that you should just at least be aware of, that we do, we're talking about the gas company here in aligning SI and CHP, and the electric company has its own specific efficiency budget that was approved in the SI proceeding in 0309.
Ms. Dundas, do you want to jump in?
I think Mr. Mendelson said what I was going to say before I clicked on, but yeah, it sounds like, and from the record here, you have proposals from staff about the importance of aligning SI, DSM for the gas company as well as the electric company. I'll just remind you that 22A0309EG, which was the company's first gas SI, was actually its BESI, its electric SI, and its gas SI. So to the extent you don't want to opine on what happens with the electric SI opinion filing today, you could sort of leave that to the discussion of the company, whether they want two dockets or not, and just ensure that from the order today, you have alignment of the gas SI and the CHP.
So I don't know, Commissioner Gilman, if you want to summarize where we're at, or if you'd like Mr. Mendelson to summarize where I can tell you I'm not going to.
Well, I have an opinion on what just
Right.
I mean, we've seen the SI as combined, as what Ms. Dundas recognized, the gas and electric companies. And to the extent, yeah, like a lot of the overlap is in the gas DSM side of things. BE then bleeds between the two. And to the extent that demand response and kind of the entire apparatus amount around electric demand response would live in the electric, I think that is incredibly related with BE and many of the actions that will take place in the clean heat plan and for that end. So to me, I'm not sitting here today indifferent. I think it should be all one thing, because I think that the demand response characteristics that come with an electric SI are incredibly important to be blended with the beneficial electrification portion.
I'm happy to decide that today. I guess my request to either you, Commissioner Gilman, or you, Mr. Mendelson, is to summarize what very clearly what's the proposed regulatory pathway forward, and make sure we're all on the same page.
Okay, I will do my best.
Unless you want to do it, Commissioner Gilman. Nope. Ms. Dundas, are we straying?
No. I'm backing up quarterback for Mr. Mendelson here. We'll do it together in the pathway here.
In case he needs to phone a friend.
Okay. As I understand it, we would have a combined CHP SI filing in, I believe it's July 2026, when statute requires that next SI filing. That would cover all CHP issues, but also all DSM and BE issues that would otherwise be covered under an SI proceeding. I'd like to hold off on the DR issues for further conversation, but just going forward, the GSM and BE would clearly be under that single filing. Okay, so we would eliminate the check-in process that was proposed under the Flex Plan in 2026. We would evaluate inducement under that combined CHP-SI proceeding, including some way to have a consistent approach, whether that's PIM, amortization, or some combination. We would keep the separate plan proceedings for the time being, with potentially the option to actually combine that with under a larger umbrella proceeding. As far as the potential study and supply curve that was expected under the SI proceeding, I think that is something that the commission should discuss. It could be provided at that same time. We won't have the opportunity to have it, finalized. So we would be working on it as we would be working on the remainder of the other options, and I would say pros and cons to that. We would shorten the CHP approval process here to 2024 to 27 and allow for course correction. And I believe that's my understanding, where we would not modify or touch the GIP process in any way at this juncture. And as far as the SEAMS proceedings, or the MDocket proceedings, we would initiate the SIM, conduct a little better understanding of how to go forward with the SEAMS docket. And as far as the cost effectiveness alignment concepts, we could do that in under the CHP. That actually is more of a rulemaking MDocket that would involve other companies. So I think that is also kind of a separate conversation of how to proceed with that concept. Ms. Dundas, am I missing anything?
No, I think you got it all. One thing we should come back to before we're done today is just that alignment process for a quick vote. But I agree with everything Mr. Mendelson said. Regarding the MDockets, I understood it as we would move forward with the SEAMS MDocket proposed by the company here. Some of the larger questions on alignment of SI and CHP would be indicated as things we want explored in the 2026 application. The AQCC SIM idea from Commissioner Plant would come back to a future CWM for scheduling. And then to the extent that there's additional like pre-rulemaking MDockets or something like that on cost effectiveness or additional alignment concerns, I would just recommend flagging interest in that with no perhaps promises at this point, just in light of the rest of the workload and other rulemakings that may be coming up that this may fit into.
Commissioner Gilman.
Yeah, just maybe a few things to point out. When Mr. Mendelson mentioned plan filing, it's hard because all of these things are called plans. So I think when you mention plan filings, you mean like the annual DSM BE plans, just making sure everyone's on the same page. I think he said those will go as normal or something.
So on that one, Commissioner Gilman, since that's open in 23A0589 EG, I imagine that if the filing deadline is going to deviate from what's in the commission's rules for the next one, that's an issue before the ALJ there.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to like clear up the semantics since every single thing here is called plan. Make sure everyone knew what we were talking about. I just wanted to point out under the regulatory pathway that we're talking about for this combined CHP-SI filing in 2026, from what I think we understand, July 2026 is the latest possible, given the statutory requirements on no more than 4 years for certain of those plan types. So I think that's like the anticipated. Could it come in June? Like, probably. I just want to point out, I think the reason we're saying July is that's like the deadline. To Commissioner Plant's point, I mean, I don't know if we suggest or order, but feeling significantly burned today by the other PIM situation. Perhaps we can order a stakeholder process to occur in the lead up to this combined filing, specifically to work on proposing a greenhouse gas related PIM within that filing. So those are the few clarifications. So as I understand it, with the other separate issues coming out, I don't think I disagree with what I heard. The transport or the SEAMS issues, which includes transportation as well as different types of customers, will likely stay separate and run on its own timing. The AQCC idea brought up by Commissioner Plant, we could pursue a commissioner information meeting on. The two other issues kind of I have on my list was one was the integration process that I think that's integration of what's going on in DSM and BE now, like at the plan level with what comes out of here. Unless I'm wrong, Mr. Mendelson, in terms of like, how do you take these whole pots of money and say, what are the programs? What are you going to do? Where are you going to focus on? And I think that's going to stay separate. That'll run, you know, after I think that DSM plan is done. That's before the ALJ. The only thing I would add with regard to that integration process, since we have a number of issues in this CHP, like we have you'll have the regular DSM funding and BE funding from the plan. You'll have the additional electrification and DSM funding coming out of the CHP approval. And then you also have the NPAs, which are in here under market transformation, but not, there's no discussion of different programs for them. And I would like to just specifically request that as part of that integration process, the company addresses what differences they would have in the NPA pursuit versus other standard programming. Seems to me it's probably a different approach because economically we care quite a bit if those investments can be avoided. So this is not the same as just electrifying some other customer who is not helping you avoid an immediate potential expense. So just a plug for in that integration process that will come after this for the company to specifically differentiate what their plans are for the NPA programs specifically as it relates to outreach and rebates, really.
I guess, can I don't know if you have more issues, but can I make
I have one more.
Can I make a comment on that one before you go to your last issue, which is, for me, I'd like to start comprehensively or getting, you know, it may take 5 years, but getting to a point where we evaluate demand forecasting, capital spending, long-term rate impacts, emissions, and our BE, DSM, NPA programs. So we're comprehensively looking at capital spending rates and emissions in a single holistic process. So I guess just building on your last comment, I'd like some language in this order, sort of where we state our intent to take administrative notice of the GIP and just look at the everything together, capital, emissions, rates, and demand forecasting. So before you go to your last issue, any comments or thoughts on that?
I mean, from what I know right now in running these processes, I would say like they're highly interrelated and should inform each other. I'm not at all convinced they should be combined.
Fair enough. I just want to look at the issues together. It was really frustrating for me that the rate impacts and the capital and avoiding capital were not at the heart of this clean
Totally.
heat.
Like the NPAs are coming with obvious avoided capital benefit that's not in any way like really transparently presented as part of this. And also the MTP portfolio in total does not suggest what its abatement will be, whereas like the NPAs, you know, that's part of what will go on in electrifying and pursuing DSM. It's all the same strategies that you're using elsewhere that do cause abatement. So yeah, I think we can do better to move the data across these two. I would just I would stop well short of suggesting they're combined. I would say they're highly interrelated.
Yeah, advisors and counsel convinced me not to even argue for that. I've already lost.
The only other issue that we had coming out of this was the cost effectiveness alignment issue, and if that's going to be an M docket or if that's going to be something else. So getting to that interrelated nature, coming out of the GIP, we're planning on opening an M docket on the cost benefit handbook and analysis of NPAs. It strikes me it might make sense to make some ground there before we determine exactly what happens here. I'm not saying it's exactly the same thing, but there's quite a bit of overlap in how you might calculate or decide what's in, what's out in some of these calculations. So perhaps we see what happens in that process we're already talking about running, that is related. That's all I have.
Commissioner Plant, anything you'd like to add, say differently, concerns with what Commissioner Goman is proposing?
Nope.
I think me either, other than the one point about expanding the MPA analysis to be more about how you avoid capital and including long-term rates, and highlighting the relationship between the GIP and the Clean Heat Plan, DSM-SI. Mr. Mendelson, do you have what you need?
I'm really getting there. I'm kind of, yeah.
10 hours and 5 deliberations into
How
this.
well this is going, yes. One issue I would like to bring up is Commissioner Gilman mentioned DR, which is currently part of the SI. And I don't know if we need to make a decision here or if you would just like to discuss, but whether that would continue under, then fold into under the CHP process as we currently envision the SI proceeding happening.
We have to decide this now. Can we wait and see what we get on the August ERP filing? And I mean, I think that's a bigger issue than just the clean heat plans.
Of course, yeah. I apologize to throw that monkey wrench in there, but I mean, at some point we'll need to message the company, I think, but I think that is, as we're kind of like creating efficiencies and aggregating these proceedings, that is like one thing that maybe the commission could discuss.
Yeah, to me, the DR is going to be more tightly to the electric distribution system planning, the VPP. I think I'd rather take that up on the electric side. But Commissioner Gilman, thoughts?
I mean, I'm generally envisioning that the DSM-SI proceeding is what it already is, and it's combined with CHP, which would include all of the issues.
Including DR.
Mm-hmm.
I think the VPP stuff is going to change that. I think separating DR from the VPPs is going to be tough. But I don't know, hour 10 of a 5-day deliberation. I'm just ready to give up out of exhaustion. So, Commissioner Plant, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we addressed this here, but I mean, one of the things that's been brought up are the number of various different riders that come out of each of these different proceedings and how we can combine them. And in my mind, the DR component was kind of falling more within the DSP. I think that the legislation calls it the rider a modernization rider or something. I can't remember what they called it, but that would probably all the VPP, DR, demand flexibility and management stuff would fall under there, and the DSMBE would fall under whatever, either CHP or the DSMCA.
Let's based on Commissioner Plant's comment. Let's table this until we have the new DSP statute in front of us and see what that says. That I think there's guidance to be provided there, and having the three of us try and resolve it based on first principles at the current time is probably not ideal. So that's my advice, Mr. Mendelson.
Okay, it's fine. I just I appreciate you had the opportunity to talk about that a little bit.
Is that okay with you, Commissioner Gilman?
Yep.
Mr. Mendelson.
Yes, sir. Okay, so we're down to the minute detail here. So, and I believe what we're going to do, I'm sorry, I don't have a practice decision point here, but as far as the integration plan process, we, I believe with the commission has decided that the current decision would approve immediate augmentation of existing rebates using clean heat funding as to not delay the 2024 efforts that was proposed by Public Service. And then I guess the decision before you is whether to modify the stakeholder process as suggested by WRA Sweep CC. And a quick summary of that is within 45 days of the final decision in the 23A0392EG proceeding, a stakeholder process should begin. Within 90 days of the kickoff of that stakeholder process, the company would file an informational filing in the CHP 0589EG docket that describes the integration plan. And they did also have a few more elements that regarding the required exchange that the company would have to include the stakeholders specifically in developing that 60-90 day. So I just want to confirm that you support that activity going forward as the integration plan.
Makes sense to me, Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I support that.
Commissioner Gilman.
Yeah, I support that process with probably just the addition that I already mentioned, that I would like the company to differentiate for MPA, specifically if they have different outreach or a rebate plan.
Fine by me.
Okay, great. And then I might ask, okay, then the final decision points, one that we would deny, commission would deny what wasn't specifically deliberated upon in this in this set of deliberations here.
Absolutely. Commissioner Plant.
Yes.
Commissioner Gilman.
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Dundas.
No, I just, on the list I thought we were going on, I just had one more maybe before we got to that one to finish up the regulatory pathway discussion, which was the company is proposing using the 60-90 day process similar to the DSM and the TEP for modifications to offerings moving forward. They also propose that staff's notice of deficiency powers, for lack of a better word, would be removed from that process for the CHP. You have been mentioning the 60-90 day process throughout the last 12 days. So just let's take a vote on continuing that process and moving that or using that process for CHP efforts as well, and whether or not you think staff should have a deficiency notice of deficiency ability.
Do you have a recommendation?
Yes and no. So continue the 60-90 and allow staff to continue having that ability. Is that right, Mr. Mendelson?
Yes, that's right. Thank you for bringing that up.
Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I think, the only thing that gives the 60-90 day process any kind of teeth is the deficiency determination. So, yeah.
Commissioner Gilman.
I agree.
As do I.
Great. Okay, so juggling documents here.
So the next one, as Mr. Mendelson's getting his document up, is CHP cost recovery. So Public Service requests Commission approve the deferral of a consultant, transcript, hearing, and legal costs in a non-interest bearing regulatory asset for presentation in a future cost recovery proceeding.
You okay with that? Commissioner, Ms. Dundas, you okay with that?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty standard one for these application proceedings.
Commissioner Plant,
Yes.
Commissioner Goen,
Yes.
I support it as well.
And then the next one was sort of mine also. I had flagged that we may have to waive rules depending on how you come out on the regulatory process discussion. It's kind of been ongoing real time, but at this point, I don't have any to present.
Why don't we put some language in the order saying that we support conforming changes as necessary to implement the decision, something like that.
I was hoping you would just let me bring it back for 9th or 10th deliberation sometime next week instead, but
No.
yeah, that's
No.
fine, Chair.
No, denied. You okay with the language I'm proposing, Commissioner Plant,
Yes.
Commissioner Gomez?
As tempting as the offer was for more deliberations, yeah.
No mas, no mas.
And
Mr.
then
Mendelson,
then the final decision, as far as I understand, is the compliance filing. We will need an updated DSM tariff, and then any additional direction that you would like to see immediately, that you'd like to give the company immediately. I would recommend that the company make best efforts to calculate the emission reductions based on your final decision through at least 2027, and that would help level set as we're going forward what we expect in to see as a starting point in the next CHP application.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree.
Commissioner Gomez,
I also agree.
as do I.
Great. With that, I believe we're done, but ask this done just to confirm.
And as far as I'm concerned, I think this is going to be a TBC decision.
Mr. Mendelson, I just wanted to confirm, I brought up the idea of presenting in the decision the annual incremental abatement as well as gas throughput expectations that accompany the budget. I think I still support. I want to be sure. And then I could read off a bunch of numbers, but I'll tell you what it is the modeling run based on that flex base with the 2 adjustments that halves 24 adjust the supply side resources accordingly.
I could read those off as well if that would be helpful, and as well as the annual budget that we're specifically approving.
Yeah, so I'm just looking for confirmation from the other two that we will include those in the decision, and if they want them read off here or are comfortable with that description of how they were arrived upon.
I support that.
As do I.
Okay. And if I could quickly, so the commission is approving what we believe to be $440 million and $440.5 million overall, 36.2 million in 2024, 117.3 million in 2025, 137.2 million in 2026, 149.7 million in 2027. Does include the flex, the 15% flex on individual resource investments per year, which would be subject to the 60-90 day. And most of that value is in the electrification and then gas DSM and market transformation. The remaining.
That's consistent with my understanding, Commissioner Plant.
Yes.
Commissioner Gomez.
Yes, just to clarify on the flex, both year to year as well as amongst categories of resources, that it is your suggestion that would have to go through the 60-90 day process in order to exercise either of those kind of flex situations?
I believe so. Yes.
I was just confirming, just
that specifically, but
clear.
Yeah, I think I would suggest any change in and budgets, either increasing them or moving funds around, would go through a 60-90 day.
Okay, so any use of the flex is a 60-90 day situation.
That's right.
All right, are we there, Mr. Mendelson?
I believe we are. Appreciate your time. Continued engagement over these last weeks. So
Thank you, sir. Thank you, and Ms. Dundas, greatly appreciated.
Thanks to the teams. They were really super supportive and helpful along all this venture of ours.
Mr. Davis, anything on the EDR before we can eat lunch?
Did you call me up?
Yes. Are we good on the EDR?
I believe we are. If the commission is deciding not to overturn the ALJ's determination to make approval of the EDR rate and TCA subject to additional reviews in future rate cases, but simply requiring the company to make a presentation about costs related to the QTS facility in its future rate cases, I think we're good.
I think that's exactly what you were requesting, Commissioner Gilman.
Yes, yeah, I think the transparency is important. If the argument being put forth here is that there's no cross subsidization, then let's show it in future rate cases, and that way we can actually follow the breadcrumbs in the future.
Commissioner Plant, anything to add? Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Plant, anything further before we go get something to eat?
Nope, I'm not going to stand between you and lunch.
Commissioner Gilman.
Thanks to the team. Happy to wrap up the cleaning. It's not gone. It won't be gone for a while, but thank you very much to that team for all their hard work.
Yeah, maybe at least we'll get a week off, a couple days. With that, thanks to everybody. We're adjourned.